All right, so we will call this meeting to order at 4 p.m. July 7th, 2020. We're looking for adoption of the agenda for the standing committee agenda. Councilor Reyes?
I move to adopt.
Okay. Any question or any discussion? Oh, sorry, I should ask first, is there any changes? My apologies. Do we have any changes from council? Apologies, sorry, Councilor Reyes. And any changes from administration?
None.
Okay, and Councilor Reyes has made that motion. So all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we're going to move on to our action items. And the first of action is the procurement policy, FN-1300. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This policy is before Council this afternoon as an update to the purchasing policy 016. Upon review, the versions are very different, as the initial policy was created in 1989 and then revised in 2012. The evolution of standard practices and the need for consistent application, expectations management, and execution resulted in the overhaul of the previous policy. Administration previously had difficulty understanding and following the purchasing policy as it was written previously, or the current version, I suppose. Through the development of the new policy, training would be provided to administration to ensure that the policy is adhered to moving forward. The recommended action tonight is that committee recommend council approve procurement policy FN-1300 as presented and rescinds purchasing policy 016. Due to the substantial changes, administration understands that there may be a need for some robust discussion tonight, and we're happy to receive any questions that council might have. Joining me tonight are some administrators that worked on the new version of the policy, including Ms. Fox, and our municipal intern, Mr. Fayez, who's joining us through Zoom. At this point, we would be happy to entertain any questions that council has on the new policy.
Great. Thank you, CEO Olson. So council, any questions on this procurement policy? Councilor Nelson?
And do I just leave myself muted on here, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. One of the things that we hear pretty regularly is that it's very difficult for local businesses or contractors to get tenders from the town. Is it something within the realm similar to how we have, wherever economically feasible, goods or services that are environmentally preferred? Would we be able to have a similar thing where it would be wherever economically feasible, the town will procure goods or services locally? And if I can follow up on that, one of the concepts is to get best value. And ultimately, if the spend is local, it will bring more value to the community as far as dollars spent, employment, and all of those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through to Councillor Nelson. Mr. Fayez, our intern, has done substantial research and review of best practices and standard practices across other municipalities. I'd like to give him an opportunity to maybe field this question and share what he's learned.
Thanks so much, through to the council. I think some of the municipalities do have the explicit provision of giving some preference to the local vendors within the minimal threshold. So above 75,000 for goods and services and about 200,000 for construction, we cannot legally give any preference for local vendors because that's in the purview of the trade agreements that we are part of as being part of Alberta. But for lower thresholds, we can have explicit local preference. However, that is not the best practice, as in most of the municipalities I looked into in Alberta don't have that explicitly in their policy. Some do. And when I spoke internally with the main internal stakeholders, like the directors and managers which deal with procurement, oftentimes they mention that instead of having a local preference explicitly, the way it works is exactly how you mentioned, which is best value. And the best value has non-price factors in it. So for example, if we think about, let's say, car dealerships. So if we want to purchase a vehicle, we can do it from someone who is in Edmonton compared to here. and there might be a price difference where we get the cheaper proposal from some agent in Edmonton. However, because of other non-price factors, for example, serviceability, things like that, which might make it make the best value for the town to purchase it from the local vendor. So that local vendor component comes in when the directors or the managers are comparing different proposals and trying to assess the best value for the town, but it's not explicitly mentioned in our updated policy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'd love to hear where council stands on some things, but we don't make that assumption with environmental stuff, and we're putting that in policy. Depending on how this conversation goes, I'd like to make a direction at some point in regards to local procurement. So, thanks.
Thank you. Council, any other questions or pieces you'd like to ask about? Councilor Rees?
Thank you. So, what was he saying about if it's above 75,000 or below 200? Or
thank you, Chair. I believe to paraphrase Mr. Fayez, he was saying that legally above those thresholds, we're not able to, but below, there is consideration that can be given to local vendors.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rees. Any other thing from council? Councilor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What about in progress 2020 items? So these, something like a couple weeks ago, we were discussing the sign program and which purchasing policy it falls under. So how do we know as council from a oversight and transparency standpoint, what falls under old versus new?
Thanks. I'll take a stab at it, and then I may defer to Ms. Fox as well for some support. In my in transitioning from the previous policy to the new policy, anything that's not been initiated, I believe, would fall under the new policy, and anything that has been would fall. So any agreements, any RFP processes and whatnot would follow the previous policy, and we would have a period of transition where we may be using both. So we'll rescind the policy as it is used for any future items, but follow through on anything that's been initiated prior to the approval of this new policy. Ms. Fox, if there's anything that you wish to add.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's just, when we talked about signage, there was conversation about we don't really need to worry about that because we're updating, or we're going to be updating and bringing forward the new policy. So it seemed like it created a bit of a pre-thought to existing projects going under a policy that hadn't yet been approved. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nelson, any other questions from council? Councilor Nelson.
On page 10 of 24, under procurement authority, it speaks to emergency policies. And in 2019, it was expressed to council that we would receive an emergency expenditures policy prior to the end of 2019. And I obviously have concerns that we have no policy or no updated policy for emergency expenditures that both meets the needs for administration, because from what I understand, the old one doesn't meet the needs at all. But we're now including emergency purchases in a new policy, but an existing policy is either not, I think it's not appropriate for administration, it doesn't work, but there's been no update as to where an updated policy would be. I guess the question is, is there going to be an emergency policy still coming forward? And if not, what governs the emergency purchases that we're doing if we're not using the old one that didn't work for administration?
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So really any emergency purchase policy that gives anyone the authority to spend outside of the budget is contradictory of the MGA. So the policy that was in existence gave powers to certain individuals to spend outside of their authority. Knowing that that policy negates the MGA, there was, and I guess maybe it was something that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know that there was a commitment to bring back an emergency policy. I don't have that listed. That could just be an oversight on my part. But the intention was to ensure that all purchasing required was covered under the procurement policy that we're bringing forward. So right now, what would happen in an emergency situation is that the CAO and the directors would work together to make sure that they could repurpose funds if it's an operating budget item within the budget, and they have the authority and approval to do those types of emergency purchases. What we were doing within the capital and project budget was trying to build in an unplanned expenditure limit for the departments that have higher spending of capital to hit, cover off capital projects. And that's important because it helps support healthy spending that sticks within the MGA and doesn't force unnecessary emergency costs to try and fit within an operating budget. So in those circumstances, the infrastructure services director, in a case of an emergency purchase that you have to do, which is defined in the policy, to carry on and meet service delivery, he could access his unplanned expenditure amount. Because of the challenges we've had around budgeting and having funds available, in 2020, some of those emergency or unplanned amounts got reduced or removed, but there is still one in infrastructure services. So the difference being in an operating budget and in a capital budget, the capital, we're trying to have these unplanned expenditure allotments. In the operating budget, if there's an emergency item we can't fit within budget, the only way to do that is to bring that to council. So having a policy that says the CAO can approve something outside or over the budget would be for naught. So what we're looking to do is to make sure that if an expense is required. So I've had a situation where there's a water leak on a street, and we've had to rush in, and it's damaged equipment, and we're spending money to fix that issue right then. We're not going to wait to try and get 2 weeks of an approval for a budget amendment. So there is an obligation of the CAO to inform council and have council approve that expenditure and make a budget amendment. So that might be that we need to access reserve funds to cover the expense that was never budgeted for. And there's still risk in that council might say, hey, we don't actually want you to access reserve funds. We want you to fit this within operating. And then the CAO would be left to make some sort of reduction in operating. Bottom line is, unless there's a budget amendment from council, you can't spend over the budget. So having a policy that allows you to do that negates that. So having an emergency policy would be for naught. I'll leave it at that because that was kind of long, and see if there's any questions.
I can follow up, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so where I struggle is how we define emergencies. I think looking at 2019, there were purchases that were made that had plenty of time to come to council. There was no actual emergency. So part of it is how we define emergency, and the other part of it is, there's been an ask of council to include emergencies within our budget, which I agree with. But the moment we include it in our budget, then any of the reporting and any of that stuff that's required by this policy is no longer needed because we have approved capital and operating budgets. So I like, obviously with emergency, we need to spend the money, but how do we know what the threshold for emergency is? And then if moving forward, we include emergency budget line items, there's not the same oversight because it's within budget. So I'm just not comfortable with the understanding of both types of emergencies and how we manage those and as council can have some sort of accountability to it.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was reading a book. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's appropriate, Mr. Fayez, I believe would like to provide some clarification.
Sorry, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the council. So if you look at the policy in the definition section, 6.19, we define what we mean by emergency purchase in the policy. And that explicitly says when the lack of immediate action. So if there is no necessary immediate action for that would disrupt critical services to the public or have damage to the town property or in general safety of the community or the personnel, that wouldn't be justified under this specific policy of emergency purchases. I think that's the first sort of concern to be addressed. And the second thing I just want to mention is that this provision is actually also a best practice across municipalities. So in the report, I cite specifically within the attachments, which other municipalities have this exact provision. And I think the importance of this provision is that in those sort of extenuating circumstances where lack of immediate action would result into some serious damages or disruption in critical services, that the town has some ability to take action swiftly without going to the council, which might require a lot of time. So I think that is the main intention behind having this part of the policy. And again, with talking with the internal stakeholders, my understanding was that because our current policy doesn't have this provision, oftentimes people have to do these emergency purchases outside our policy, which is not something we should do. And so having this within the policy will give the town that ability to make those necessary purchases without going to the council in times of emergency, without sort of contravening or like going outside the policy we have. So.
Thank you. So is that Councilor Nelson, any other further follow-up?
Well, I think if I could just give an example and understanding how it would fit into the new policy. So last year, there was an emergency expenditures for training aides for the fire department. That is something that would now, with this existing policy, fall outside, and that would have to come to council for approval because there's no imminent harm or damage or anything like that. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
It's, thank you, Chair, through your council. I don't think that would have fit within a defined emergency expenditure. So that isn't something that I would have considered an emergency expenditure. I think that the training aids were something that was brought up through the community grant program. And then direction was provided through council not to provide a community grant, but to cover it out of operations, which is what occurred. So that.
Yeah, and I think using that as an example helps because it's a small dollar amount and it's not, and I've looked back on it and there's no explicit direction given, but absolutely an assumed direction given, and I understand why it was covered without through operating. So, but it's just a good example to understand what wouldn't be appropriate for this policy, and I appreciate this conversation because it makes me feel a lot more comfortable with where we're at. When we get to budget or discussing whether we have those as line items, then that'll be something we can discuss at that time. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair, through to council as well. And just to ensure council, just like council has had the authority in 2019, you still have the authority now. If you discover or feel like that there was an expenditure that has come forward that was outside of anybody's authority or that put us in a position that was over budget, council always has the ability to hold the CAO accountable to that. So if that's something that's found and called out, you would approach your CAO and deal with it through your CAO. So anything like that in the past has always had that avenue.
All right, I just have one question as myself in the queue, and it's around this, and I appreciate Mr. Fayez, your explanation, because the emergency purchases, covered that. I guess my question, we still also have to get a report it's a retroactive report from the CAO. Now let's just say, devil's advocate, that's a retroactive that maybe we don't agree with the how does that work? Just out of curiosity, like if the CAO signs off on it as an emergency, but in that report, council finds it not, would it then have to come out of the operations budget and find it in other ways, or how would that potentially work? Just as a for instance, and I'll do CEO Olson, and then if
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it almost exactly what you said there. If council disagrees with the definition of, or how the definition of emergency purchase was applied in that case, can direct the CAO to find the money within the operating budget to offset that expenditure. So that would mean a reduction in a different line item or a reduction in a different project not moving forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions or thought or discussion on any other parts of this? Yes, Councillor Nelson.
On 5.4.3B, so page 9 of 124, it says that a minimum of 3 written quotations or proposals must be received, which conceptually I love, and the more the merrier. But with it saying must be received, what happens if we only get 1 bidder or 2 bidders? Do we then put it out for a new tender? Or are we able to move forward even if there aren't 3?
CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll defer to Mr. Fayez to answer this one.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the council. So to sort of make some arrangements, exactly sort of addressing that concern, if you look at the policy, specifically 5.4.7, under the same section, it says that in the event that the number of responses received are insufficient, so exactly that, let's say you require 3, but you don't get the 3, then you have different options available. So for example, you can either extend the deadline, you can cancel the purchase temporarily, or you can choose within the responses received, but you have to need an approval from the CEO explicitly. So that is just putting that check in so that, let's say you get only 1 quotation and you're not just going ahead by yourself without consulting the CEO. So that is specifically addressing that concern, that in case you don't get sufficient responses, what you do.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Fayez. Thank you.
Councillor Stashik, do you have anything? Oh, sorry, somebody caught you there, so you had something. So, Council, any other further questions? Councillor Nelson?
I'll make a direction and see where it goes. Direct administration to include in the procurement policy statement a section in regards to procuring goods and services locally. And if I could speak to it, I'm not really concerned with the exact verbiage. I would rather administration come up with the verbiage, but really just saying if all else is equal and it doesn't change the economics, that we would look locally ahead of somewhere else. Whether it's a car or it's lumber or it's anything else, if we can procure it locally for the same cost, or even provide the opportunity for someone local to match it, we're going to be creating more revenue through taxation, more jobs, and more local impact than we would if it was sourced from Calgary. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Nelson. We have a direction now. Any questions or discussion on this particular? Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my only question to administration, because I do like this, and on a high level, I think I support this. My train of thought was, do we want to update section 6.7 that talked about best value? It speaks to it lightly, and maybe an overarching approach to this is better because it would touch upon all aspects. I guess my question to administration or Mr. Fayez is, if that were to be the will of council to add something of this nature, should we be looking at subsections in order to deal with the amounts of $75,000 and over, and putting in verbiage that doesn't contradict the fact that we can't really choose local, because I know Mr. Fayez alluded to legally over 75,000, or should we have an overarching that touches all of the different levels? I guess that's my question is, should we speak to a specific section or have an overarching definition for local purchasing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be something that administration needs to take away and determine. I feel like there's merit in including something under best value, either a sub-bullet that includes reference to local procurement and includes the parameters that we need to meet the free trade agreement. That's something that I feel perhaps merits a little further discussion with administration to ensure that we're meeting what we need to.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair? If that's the case, the motion on the floor, is that motion enough for you to incorporate and have some of that insight that touches, I guess, my concern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Mayor Michaels, I think that would achieve that. I know that Mr. Fayez may have some examples to provide or some additional clarification. As I said, he's done substantial research on this and has a very intimate knowledge of the policy and the changes from the previous one to this one. So I may ask for him to weigh in on that, but I do feel that what's included in that motion would be enough for administration to take away and make those amendments to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, and if there's anything that needs to change with the direction, I'm happy to. I really just kind of copy pasted what 1.4 was in my brain, and if I would love administration to take and find where it makes most sense, especially on best practices. That's your guys' department to make what we say makes sense. So I'm good if it needs to change at all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Fayez.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the council. I think the only thing I will add here is that from other municipalities which have some sort of local preference provision in their policy, the way they normally phrase it is addressing that specific concern that the mayor brought up, which is they would state something along the lines that we will have local preference for goods and services under some threshold, which is legally possible, to specifically avoid legal battles. Because if you have a general statement, there can be legal challenges later on, which may be unlikely, but also possible, where people challenge you that you cannot do that under the trade agreements that we're part of. So I would expect something like that, but I'll look more into it given council's direction. So yeah.
I guess I have a question around that, and I'm all for, shopping locally and things like that when it comes to this, but are we handcuffing ourselves? Are we scaring away potential bidders on things because putting a preference in there as local, that we look at only local, is that going to then not necessarily get the best value in some of the cases, outside businesses and stuff see, well, they're going to go local anyway on this. And, I just curious, because I guess how I interpret this is that is already in the consideration based on this best value, that of course we're going to look at what is local first, even if, like you said, it may be cheaper to get a product in Edmonton, but when you look at servicing, you look at all the big picture, you're going to take that into consideration. So I'm just worried as a third party, in a small community, that other vendors or something may not take advantage of some of those biddings because, they might see that as they're going to shop locally anyway, right? So I'm curious on what you've looked into as administration, if that's if there's anything to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, I may defer to Mr. Fayez. I think there are a variety of reasons why communities may or may not include something like that in the policy that they put forward. I know it is something that through that best value discussion is considered when we choose who to move forward with. And outside of the actual price tag of what we're looking at doing, to ensure that we're making reasonable decisions and looking, for the components of that best value conversation and incorporating that in our decision making. I'm not sure if Ms. Fox or Mr. Fayez has something to add to that in the research that's been done in preparing this policy, if we have encountered reasoning on either side, further to what we've already discussed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through to Council. What I think it's a mixture of is our past experience, purchasing experience in the town of Hinton. Sometimes it is limiting, but I think what Fayez will probably go to as well is having the factors in there to have some non-financial parameters set up are important, and having one of those being local is important. What we don't want to get into is the situation where local vendors feel that they have the step up, but they still don't deliver the customer service that's needed. And that has happened. So sometimes there's been personnel issues, there's been customer service issues, there's been quality issues. And if we can't have that be one of the factors that makes us, you get more points if you're local when we go through the tender process. For purchasing under $75,000, just ensuring that there's still the ability to have a number of ranking options, not just say, I'm local, so you get it. Because there is that entitlement that I've had to deal with.
Steve Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess further to that is how it's weighted, and if it's there's any indication that, and I think including it in the best value piece or definition is one way to get around that it's weighted along with those other value pieces or value added pieces. Putting it on its own may indicate to potential bidders that that is of higher weighting in the RFP process.
Okay. Council, any other discussion? If I may, I'm all for giving this back to administration for best practices. Obviously, a lot of research has gone into this and the wording that best suits our community and, both benefits the opportunity for local vendors, but also, again, not to, I guess, deter others as well, because I also, I'm not, but if we weren't to choose, for example, a vendor from a local community or from the town of Hinton, yet they put it in, then, aren't you supposed to be going locally? So the wordsmithing is definitely in how we put it in here is going to be really important. So, but I'm all for taking back to administration and seeing what's best suited for and coming back to us with it. So, okay, thank you. Councilor Reyes?
Thank you, sir. I totally agree with you. I'd hate for someone to come to me and say, the policy says you're going to deal locally, says it. I need it to say crystal clear that this is what it says. You're not guaranteed, to get this. So the wording is very important.
Okay, so if there's no other question, I'm going to call this, thank you, Wendy. I'm going to call this then to question that committee direct administration to include in the procurement policy statement a section in regards to procuring goods and services locally. Councilor Nelson.
If I could, if everybody's amenable, just removing the statement from that, then it's just somewhere within the policy, because 1.0 is the policy statement, and so by taking away statement, it allows it to fall wherever administration sees it to fit best within that policy.
Okay. Is everybody in agreement to that? I don't see. Councilor Waugh, you're okay? Okay, if there's no objections, then Wendy, if you could make that
I changed it.
change already? Okay. All right, so I'll reread then. Call to question. Okay. All right, that committee direct administration to include in the procurement policy a section in regards to procuring goods and services locally. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, so back to the procurement policy then. Any other questions on the entirety of the procurement policy? Is it FN 1300? Yeah. No? All right. Oh, Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Chair. When council is done, I think maybe one of the councillors put their hands up. I'll wait till the end before we close this topic.
Okay. Sorry, was there someone who put their hand up?
I was just gonna give the direction, so
Oh, okay.
if there's something prior to us making the direction that we should be made aware of, I'm
Good. I guess, Ms. Fox?
Thank you, through to council. I just really want to give a shout out to Fayaz.
Mm-hmm.
His help for me has been invaluable. The work that's gone into this policy, I'm super proud of. It was very collaborative. The amount of work and research and how he intimately got to know the topic was just phenomenal for me. So I just want to say thank you very much, and we really wanted to give him this opportunity to present it to you, answer your questions. Obviously, if there are other questions looming afterwards, I'm sure he'd be able to feel very confident that he's got most things covered here. So thank you very much, Fayaz. Really appreciate it. And I'm excited about this policy moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. And I just want to thank you for being here, Fayaz. First of all, you haven't had that opportunity yet, so we haven't all got to meet you yet. But yeah, thank you for that. So, all right. So, Councillor Nelson.
like to make the direction that committee recommends, this is number 2, Wendy, sorry. The committee recommends council approves procurement policy FN 1300 as amended and rescinds purchasing policy 016. I have a few questions and they've all been answered, and I'm looking forward to having just a little bit in there about locally. And other than that, it's nice to see something updated that falls within the other legislation that it is required to fall within. So thanks for everybody on the work on this.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. If I also may, before any other, but reading the last one, it was quite more in depth. This one was a little more condensed but thorough in what the meaning of it was as well, and you kind of get lost in all those other things. I guess the one question I do have before we move on this too is that the other things that were in there on the tendering process and all that, I'm guessing is in another policy or document or somewhere that it's part of that procurement, right? Because some of that stuff is not in this new one. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair, through to council. So absolutely, when council adopted the policy, the implementation of this policy follows that format, which means that the procedures that administration follow are held in the directive, which really helps policies not become outdated so quickly. So we do have the tender process pulled out into a directive, which also has procedures of how that's done with it. And it's very similar to what was in there.
Okay, thank you. All right, council, yeah. Councilor Reese and then Mayor Michaels.
Okay, so the next time we're going to see this is at our regular council meeting, and we will see it with the amendment to shopping locally. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, good.
That was my clarification.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, if I could, since I put forward the motion, if it was a more substantive change and I felt like it was going to require a lot more conversation, I'd say let's come back to committee again. But I feel pretty confident that how it will be reflected will be pretty darn close and something that is fine to go to council. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Nelson. All right, if there's no other questions on this, we have direction I'm going to call the question that committee recommends council approve procurement policy FN-1300 as amended and rescinds purchasing policy 016. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, council. So moving on to our second action item is our Northwest Alberta Charging Network. C. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is before council tonight, as through 2020, administration's been working with partner municipalities in the Northwest Alberta Charging Network Advisory Committee. As discussed in the report and included in council's information package previously, the town of Edson has submitted a letter to the town of Hinton requesting our involvement as a regional collaborator for the Northwest Alberta Electric Vehicle Charging Network in support of securing a seed grant through an application prepared by the committee. This is an opportunity to work with neighboring municipalities through a $5,000 contribution to the project through the economic development budget. The result is involvement in a $2 million total capital project benefiting regional tourism and environmental stewardship. The recommended action on this item is that committee recommend council support the neighboring municipalities seeking to raise seed and grant funding and initiate a technical working committee for the partnership of a Northwest Alberta charging network. That committee recommend council support the town of Hinton contribution seed funding of $5,000 to support the work of the technical working committee with the funds coming from the economic development marketing budget. And that committee recommend council support the town of Hinton in applying for the electric vehicle and alternative fuel infrastructure deployment initiative grant in collaboration with neighboring municipalities. Administration is prepared to provide a quick turnaround to bring this item forward for formal approval at the next regular council meeting on July 4th, pending direction from council to do so. Mr. Vanna, I believe, is present to assist me in answering any questions that council might have on this opportunity.
Thank you, C. Olson. Council, any questions? Direction? Councilor Reese?
Thank you, sir. So should this go through, have we given any thought to where the charging station would be?
Thank
you through to Councillor Race. I don't know the details in what's been considered at this point. I don't believe much work has taken place on this, including the selection of a location in Hinton to provide that charging station. I believe that's part of the work of the technical committee. But if I believe that's what's taken so far.
Okay, quickly, I'll just say, I've had citizens who want this. They would love it. And I'm thinking, being on Highway 16, the tourists that are coming in could certainly use. So I'm interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Reese. Councilor Nelson?
I'm happy to make the direction. It's option 1. Wendy, the committee recommends council supports neighboring municipalities seeking to raise seed and grant funding and initiate a technical working committee for the partnership of Northwest Alberta Charging Network. That the town of Hinton contribute seed funding of $5,000 to support the work of the technical working committee with the funds coming from the economic development marketing budget, and the town of Hinton apply for the electric vehicle and alternative fuel infrastructure deployment initiative grant in collaboration with neighboring municipalities. And if I could speak to it briefly, a lot of this came out of an Energy Futures Lab initiative in Drayton Valley called an accelerator. It was really, really great to see almost every municipality from our region there break out into 3 really specific avenues where work could actually be done, not dreamy stuff. And I think it was Mayor Michaels that sat in on the electric vehicle part of it, and looking at collaboration, looking at a small amount of money to potentially return a huge amount of impact and going after grants. Like, to me, this is exactly where we need to be as a municipality, and I'm really excited for everybody that's stepped forward to make this happen. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Any other councilor? If I may, I will be speaking in favor of this direction. I think it's a great initiative. I remember, unfortunately, I think if it was the last or the previous AUMA, our community of Jasper tried to bring a resolution forward to look at putting a charging station in Jasper. Unfortunately, it was did not go any further than AUMA. So I think this is just another way, I think, great way of trying to establish this in our communities. I think, as Councillor Ray stated as well, I think it opens up the doors to other people along this corridor that have vehicles that need charging where they don't have the ability to charge them. So it opens that up. So I think it's a good step in the right direction. I think, you know, the way that technology is going. So I definitely speak in favor of this. So thank you. All right, any other councillor? All right, so Wendy, if you could bring that up. We're going to call the question that committee recommends council support, that the town of Hinton supports the neighboring municipalities seeking to raise seed and grant funding and initiate a technical working committee for the partnership of a Northwest Alberta charging network, that the town of Hinton contributes seed funding of $5,000 to support the network or support the work of the technical working committee with the funds coming from the economic development marketing budget, and that the town of Hinton apply for the electric vehicle and alternative fuel infrastructure deployment initiative grant in collaboration with neighboring municipalities. So all those in favor then? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you again to council. And our third action item is our solid waste management program. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report's before council tonight. It provides information and options, delivering on the concepts and opportunities that were previously communicated with council during the solid waste management workshop that took place in February. And the purpose of that was to educate council on the state of solid waste collection in Hinton, and included some discussion on what is before council tonight. Commercial waste collection options, including the municipality's exit from the commercial waste collection business through a cost recovery model, options for residential waste collection, building on the pilot project in East Hardisty that saw new bins tested in that area, and residential curbside recycling. Commercial waste collection is a service that council had requested more information and options to be brought forward in September of 2017. With leadership turnover and conflicting priorities, as well as substantial work in that area, a thorough review of the options, coupled with the need to purchase a new garbage truck in 2020 and reorder bins over the next couple of years, the opportunity to try out residential waste bins was incorporated into the process as the alternate model comes at a significantly reduced cost. As well included in this report is recycling services, and that was determined in discussing solid waste collection options. Diversion and reduction of waste to collect and transport is a natural part of that complete conversation on waste collection, with the potential of new residential bins that take up less space and are much less expensive. There's an option to move to a 3-bin system for recycling. This is a substantial change in service level that requires in-depth consideration and discussion with council. Is moving in this direction will impact the community as well as local businesses. At this time, the option put forward in the report is to contract out those services to a third party through a full RFP process that would need to be undertaken. Administration does recognize that there is a lot of detailed information in this report, and this may take some time to work through. We wanted to put out all the information together in one report so that council can see the landscape of options and determine a path forward from there. In order to spend adequate time on the options that are presented, additional discussions might be required, and we recognize that as well. It was a decision made earlier this year to bring forward that holistic view of waste collection in Hinton, as there are many challenges and as well opportunities that can be addressed through some conversation and decision. With something in this scope, honestly, we could continue fine-tuning the report indefinitely as, through conversation at the SLT level. There were things to be tweaked and more discussion to be had, but we did wish to bring this conversation out to the public sooner rather than later. At this time, I do have Mr. Hawk, our Director of Infrastructure Services, here to take you through the report, assist in answering your questions. He's planning to begin with the decision flow chart if you want to flip to those attachments and use that as a tool to explore the options that are before council tonight. He'll be pausing and accepting questions when they arise, and I'll be stepping in as well to support him in that. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hawk. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Mr. Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, CEO Wilson. and I have Dale with me. If is there any operational or technical question that I can answer, Dale will be supporting me answering them. So I will be presenting mostly or helping you go through flowchart number 1, that is attachment number 2, and flowchart number 3. Flowchart number 2, attachment number 3. And time to time, I'll also bring your attention to page number 70 of 124, the summary of the cost. So first of all, flowchart number 1, solid waste management program. If we start from here as a start point, first of all, I'll be requesting council to ask yourself whether you want to continue to provide the waste collection service to commercial customer along with residential customer or not. So if the answer to your question that you want to continue to provide the service to commercial customer is yes, then option 1 applies. Then we'll follow option 1. If the answer to your question, that no, we don't want to provide waste collection service to commercial customer, then it's no, and then there will be another question asked that whether we want to continue to provide in-house service to our residential customer or contracted out. If it is in-house, if it's yes, then option number 2. If your answer to the question in-house is no, then option number 3. However, as there are some implication on option number 3, contracting out or waste collection service, we didn't do a detailed economic analysis as part of this report. However, if council desire, in a future date, we can bring a complete analysis on that particular option as well. So let us start with going back to the diamond number 1, the larger diamond, that yes, we want to continue to provide waste collection service to our commercial customer, option number 1. Then the next question, that whether we want to modernize the system or not. Though in the report, my recommendation is not to continue with our status quo because there are some cost implication and is some of the items those are getting obsolete from the market. So for economic, and I have the supporting data here. So for that purpose, we are not recommending not to modernize the waste collection system. However, for the sake of showing the detailed cost, I presented those here. So if you don't want to modernize the system, then that means is no, and then option number 1A, maintain status quo, applies. And then after that, you need to ask whether you want to implement a full cost recovery model or not. If it is no, then option 2A, future cost and revenue model applies. And in that case, the yearly cost will be $1.58847 million. If you want to apply, if your answer to full cost recovery is yes, then you will go to option number 1A3, full cost recovery model. And if you choose this option, the yearly cost will be $1.588 million, and that translates to a $14 monthly fee for residential customer, and for commercial customer it will be $97.75 per month. Now, coming back to modernizing the system, if its answer is yes, then option number 1B, modernized system. Then the next question that you will be asking whether you want to implement a full cost recovery model or not. If it is no, then your next step will be 1B2, future cost and revenue model, flat fee model. And over there, now, whether you want to incorporate a commingled recycling or not. If it is, your answer is no, then 1B2 option applies. And the cost implication of that option is put under note. Yearly cost will be $1.399 million. Residential customer monthly will pay $12, and commercial customer will pay $105, and smaller commercial customer will pay $75.25. Now coming back to the commingle, if your answer, the that yes, you want to incorporate commingle, then your option number 1B3 with a flat fee, including curbside communal recycling option will apply. And in that case, your total yearly cost will be $1.644 million, and residential customer will pay on a flat fee of $18 per month, and commercial customer, for larger customer, will pay $84.25 per month or single bill, and smaller commercial customer will pay $52.25 per month. Now coming back to full cost recovery, if your answer is yes, then next is to be 1B4 full cost recovery model. And then again, ask the same question again, whether you want to implement the commingled recycling. If it is a no, then 1B4 full cost recovery model will apply, and the yearly cost will be $1.399 million. Residential customer will pay, the single family household will pay $13.50 per month, and multi-family residential customer will pay $10.75 per month. And commercial customer, bigger commercial customer will pay $117.50 per month, and smaller commercial customer will pay $63 per month. Now, if your answer for commingle is yes, then your 1B5 full cost recovery model with curbside recycling option will apply, or the model will apply. And in that case, your yearly cost will be $1.644 million. Residential customer will pay $19.50 per month, and multi-family residential will pay $16.75 per month, and commercial customer will pay $93, larger customer, and smaller customer will pay $43.75. And further from there, you can see there is a volume-based fee structure. If council choose to implement a volume-based fee structure, like the larger generator of residential customer, like our commercial customer, will pay more, and multifamily or smaller generator will pay less based on their volume. So that is also an option that is recommended. So now, going back to the main diamond, if your answer is no, that you don't want to provide garbage collection service to commercial customer, then please go to next page, project number 2, attachment number 3. No, then the question is whether we want to continue in-house service for our residential customer, or we need to contract out. If our answer is yes, then option 2 applies. And as I mentioned previously, if your answer is no to in-house, then option 3, and as I mentioned earlier, that a detailed economic analysis is not done at this stage, but high-level cost implication, I collected some information and I put together, and basically that particular option will translate to a $19 per month without commingle, will be kind of a flat fee for residential customer. So let us go to in-house service, yes, that is option number 2, in-house. Then the same question needs to ask ourselves whether we want to modernize the system, yes or no. If it is a no, then option 2A, maintain status quo. And then same concept again, full cost recovery, yes or no. If we don't want to go with a full cost recovery model, we want to continue with a flat fee model, then option 2A2, future cost and revenue model applies. And in that case, the cost and implication is there, $1.06 million. Please keep in mind, in this option, option number 2, there is no commercial service, only residential and institutional. Now, going back to the diamond full cost recovery, if the answer to that is yes, then option number 2A3, full cost recovery model applies. And in that case, the cost implication will be $1.06 million. That translates for a single family residential will be $17.50 per month, and multi-family residential, it will be $13.50 per month. Now going back to the other diamond, whether you want to modernize the system. So if to modernize the system, then option 2B, modernized system will apply. And again, same question needs to be asked whether we want to implement the full cost recovery model or not. If it is a no, then 2B2, future cost revenue model, flat fee model will apply. And again, in that you can ask whether you want to implement the commingled recycling, yes or no. If it is no, then 2B2, full cost recovery and revenue model applies, and the yearly cost will be $948,673,000, which translates to a flat fee for $14 per month per household. If you want to apply the commingled recycling, if your answer is yes, then 2B3 flat fee with curbside commingled recycling option will apply, and yearly cost will be $1.254 million. That translates to a flat fee of $19 per household. Now going back to the full cost recovery model, if your answer is yes, then, sorry, there is a typo here. Actually, it will be 2B4, not 1B4. So 2B4, full cost recovery model. And then the next question, whether you want to implement the commingled recycling or not. If it is a no, then 2B4, full cost recovery model will apply, and the cost will be $948,673 yearly, and that translates to single family residential will be $15.25 per month, and multi-family residential will be $12.25 per month. Now, if your answer to commingle is yes under the full cost recovery model, then the 2B5 full cost recovery model with curbside commingled recycling option will apply, and the total cost, the yearly total cost will be $1.254 million, which translates to single family $20.25 per month, and multi-family residential will translate to $17.25 per month. And again, here, if you wish to, implement different, volume-based fee structure, we can do that as well. It's a lot of information, and I read very quickly. However, all this information here with the attachment, as well as the implication of any of these options, here is on the table on page 17. The increase on monthly fee under each and every option, under that column, the second last column, you can see how much the fee will increase on a monthly basis for our customers. That's all. If you have any question, I'm ready to answer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Huck. Councillor Nelson, did I see another hand up out there? Okay. Councillor Nelson.
Councillor Stashik's up there too.
Oh, is he? Okay. I thought I saw him. Okay.
Kind of a really high level one. We talk about full cost recovery. As a municipality, we will always have full cost recovery because we have to tax it. So the changes we're talking about isn't necessarily amount. It's whether, because right now, from what I understand, commercial is paying less than what it costs to deliver the service. So that burden is spread out over every taxpayer. So it takes us more closer towards a user pay system. So people are paying for what they use. And then if we were to go to with scales on the trucks and all of that, that would ultimately go to a very detailed user pay. But I think it's really important that everybody understands that we always have full cost recovery. It's just how transparent it is and how much is covered by general taxation versus it being on your utility bill and you know how much you're paying a month for that. It's not just part of your tax bill. So that's more of a statement than a question, but a really important consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question, and it's kind of a comparator question. So just say, for example, we want to compare 1B-5, which is the full cost recovery model with curbside CMR, and that would be for both residential and commercial, institutional pickup, everything. And if we want to compare it to 2B-5, which to my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically the same pickup model, but it's no commercial pickup. So commercial users would be responsible for contracting their own waste removal services. Is that correct?
Through the chair. Yes, you are correct, because on option 2, we are not providing any service to our commercial customer. So they will take care of everything at their own.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could follow up. So my math shows me that the difference between doing residential only and residential with commercial is only about $400,000 additional, which is about a 16% difference. So I'm just wondering if administration has any information, any numbers, what it would cost our commercial users if they had to contract waste management independently from the town.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From our commercial customer, I didn't collect that information. However, in a high level, I communicated to service provider, private service provider. They gave me some kind of a high level cost estimate. So for a 6-yard bin, emptying once a week, their cost is $140 plus. So depending on how much they are generating, if they need to empty the bins more than once, then the fee will go, accordingly, up accordingly. But for our in-house service, we kind of have some kind of estimate based on historical information. And we have all those built in the report, that actually how much money we are spending to provide the garbage collection service to our commercial customer. We have those information in the report.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I understand that correctly. So under 1B-5, estimated monthly fee for commercial users is going to be $93 for large commercial, $43.75 for smaller commercial, correct? Okay, and in your high-level discussion with private industry provider, they've indicated that once a week tipping fee would probably be around $140 per month for commercial users. Okay, that's what I wanted the clarification on. I just wanted to get my head around whether going with an independent contractor to do commercial pickup is going to cost the commercial users more, or if bundling it up with our residential pickup and everything like that is going to be, less dollars spent distributed amongst all the different.
I don't know if you can hear us, Albert, or Councillor Stashik, but you froze up. Yep. We'll wait till maybe she'll back.
You might have to resign it.
Oh, you're back.
There is, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm still having internet issues here. I'm not sure how much you guys got before I dropped that.
I think is the difference in costs, or is it going to cost them more money, if we bundled it up versus having to contract it?
Yep, that was basically it. It's $140-ish a month through private provider versus 93 or 43, depending on the size of your commercial business. So thank you.
Comment?
Yeah, so basically keeping the commercial service in-house, there's some benefit. For example, and that benefit actually will benefit commercial customer as well as benefit our residential customer. For example, without commercial, we estimated that we need 1.5 truck, which is kind of challenging situation. So either we buy 2 or maintain 2 truck, or we maintain 1 and the remaining contracted out. And also, it will provide us some flexibility in, during vacation or, sick call or time off and all of those. So that's why our first recommendation is to continue to provide the service to our commercial customer as well. It also gives us some kind of pride of, sense community. And some community like our size still provide that service to the commercial customer. And some, in the municipal competitor, you can see some community, they don't provide that service. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, on that point, and it's more, again, it's not a question but a statement, but based on that, if I may, I'm kind of comparing this to recently we had this conversation in regards to permits and contractors in the community and making it kind of a easier process and asking our, that everyone in our community then is getting garbage pickup, but asking our commercial businesses to go out and get a contract with someone to do all that. I see it as good business that we provide that for them. So I hear, that is, it benefits us, it benefits them. And, if it come down to it, right now I'd be in favor of continuing that service to our commercial businesses as well. But that's just, like I said, more of a comment than obviously a question. So. All right. And council, any other, questions or comments on this solid waste management action item? Councilor Stashik.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Hopefully I don't drop out this time. I do have some questions about the recycling options, option A and option B. So option B is pretty self-explanatory. I think we understand that there's entities that currently exist that would potentially be interested in a recycling contract with the town, but barring that is not the option that's pursued moving forward, how would option A look with using some type of in-house curbside commingled collection?
Mr. Chair, to the Councillor Stashik. So if I understand the question correctly, that under option 2A or 1A,
If I may, it's the recycling options, correct, Councillor Stashik? The
Correct. Recycling option A or recycling option B.
So not in your
okay,
flow.
sorry, yeah, okay.
It's on page 69 to 124.
So recycling option A basically to provide the commingled service in-house. The challenge with this option is we may have the capacity of collection, but we don't have any local infrastructure for sorting them and further processing them. So basically the only option we have that we have to ship them from here all the way to Edmonton at a minimum. In Edmonton there is a commingled recycling facility, but it will create additional pressure on our overall system. The transportation itself, will be challenging. That's why, and maybe in the future under the West Yellowhead Waste Management Authority, is there any business case of developing any infrastructure here, then in that case in the future, maybe that option can be a viable option. Because of those challenges at this time, option A of providing the in-house commingled collection service is not feasible at this time. That's why we did detailed cost analysis on option B. Contracted out. And just one little correction, our CEO mentioned 3-bin system. Actually, in this report, we are recommending 2-bin system. 1 bin for the garbage and commingle will be on bin.
Okay, can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I appreciate that clarification, Mr. Hawk, and including the comments about transportation to the commingling recycling center. But can I assume that there would also be issues and challenges with picking up the curbside recycling, as in a multi-bin system on the trucks, which would be a different system than just a waste collection? Or would it mean alternating pickups? 1 week would be waste, 1 week would be recycling? Would it mean two pickups per week if it's done in-house? So what are some of the challenges regarding pickup for recycling in-house?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, under this analysis, the communal recycling pickup is a bi-weekly pickup. And my experience in other community like RMWB, Port McMurray, they have 3-bin system, and the west bin is a weekly pickup, and the other 2 bin is alternate week pickup. So we collected some information from the private service provider, and from their experience dealing with other community or providing the same service to other community, they said a weekly garbage collection and parallelly a bi-weekly communal recycling pickup will be more than enough. And actually they see the trend that there's some of the community actually they're moving to the other direction, like garbage every 2nd week and communal recycle pickup every week, because of the need, because of the trend of our residential users.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Race, and then I have myself.
Yeah, my question has been answered. It was pickup, so I'm good.
If I may too, on that, just to add, I mean, what we're also talking about is if we were to go curbside pickup, I mean, that truck, we have trucks already that need to be almost replaced, but then we'd be putting those trucks out there at least half more of the time, because you're going out for the regular pickup, then you're going and taking those trucks out again every 2 weeks. So it's putting those trucks out there a lot more often, which is putting that wear and tear on the trucks as well. So we've also got that component of adding, if we were to go down that route. So, and then of course the transportation of it. So I appreciate this conversation, because I think there's been a little bit of worry that, from the community in regards to are we going to be taking over, and this it simply states it's not really feasible for us to do that. So
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Actually, as I mentioned, that because of the other challenges like the transportation, like the absence of local infrastructure for communal recycling processing, actually we didn't look into the detail of analyzing our capacity and what kind of impact it will create on our overall capacity if we want to do that in-house. But in the future, if is there any business case regionally, and we can build some local infrastructure, then maybe that time we can look back or look into that situation that time.
okay. All right, council. So if I may, because part of, I mean, obviously this has brought us to us too, because we had the pilot of East Hardisty with the new bins and things like that. And the question potentially is the modernization of our solid waste management, correct? So I guess part of the feedback, and I saw this, but it also, got contact by some of the residents in that area. There was some concerns over the type of bin, because I've got a couple of questions in regards to other options potentially to modernizing other than the bin in which we use. I did have concerns personally, once I saw the design of it, the worry of the wind. And I do appreciate the numbers in which you provided us, that there wasn't a lot of difference between the old bins and the new bins. But that being said, I'm not sure if everybody contributed to the survey as well, unfortunately. But is there other options of bins potentially? Like, is there some sort of system where they're maybe shorter or wider that they still provide the ergonomics that we talked about as well? Like I saw that you did some research on that, but is that a possibility to look at some different styles of bins that would still utilize the side, the lip or side tipping?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our research, basically, we found that this is the latest design bin that most of the community is using.
Mhm.
And yes, there are quality and weight-wise, there are different material, different weight-wise, different bins, but same design.
Mhm.
But for example, the same design for a 96-gallon bin, which we purchase around say less than $80, $75 or something. Same bin, same design, heavier, different material, may cost up to $400. In that case, maybe some of those bins will be heavier and will give us more stability. But if we compare the cost versus the benefit, and that's why, because of the cost benefit analysis, most of the community is going with this model.
So what you're saying, if I'm hearing, if I may, I'm asking myself, but so there are other bins that could be more stable, like the cost, which if I recall, it's about $500 a bin currently that we're spending on the current older style bins. If I'm
Sorry, I mean, our older style bin, we spend almost 600.
600, thank you. And to get a heavier possibly bin, we're looking at not much of a cost savings is what I'm hearing you say. So I guess my question, one of the things that came up and maybe, but they're in the street versus the back alley. And I know that there was some talk at the open house, like we're gonna try the street, see how it works, and there was a lot of concerns over parking and it being obstructions if they do blow over, things like that, getting the bin in and out. There was also then the look at potentially it being in the back alley, pickups preferably rather than in the front. Would that be a feasible option that might also cut down on windage or traffic being impeded or something like that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have the survey data from our
Mhm.
residents' perspective,
Mhm.
and from our operators, data collection or monitoring. Actually, our observation that these bins very rarely tipped when it is full.
Mhm.
And our observation or our experience with the older bin, those older bin can tip even when they are filled.
Mhm.
So, wind stability wise, I believe the new bins is better than our older bin. And when we launched the pilot, we were highly concerned about how we're going to deal with especially Bhutan Avenue. But our experience until now is actually great. We didn't have much concern with regards to parking versus putting the bin for emptying, and this is also a education process as well. Our residents, they are helping us greatly. They understand when they have parked vehicle, they are not putting the bin just by the car. They are bringing it, almost to the second lane or edge of, the first lane, so that the driver or the, who is going, who can empty easily, which is helping us greatly.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. First, regarding the bins themselves, I think there'll be a moment in time where we, as a council, have some input on the bins. I'd want to spend more money on a heavier bin, whether it's adding weights Currently, the pilot project bins are $96 each.
Less than $80.
Yeah, $80. So there are multiple options between $80 and $400. And I think we as a council have to look at what those options are if we're going to go permanent in the entire community. And we haven't had that conversation. I'm looking at 10 different options of bins because there are many options around the world for these types of bins, and we have to pick the right model for our community. And without having a closer look, I think we're doing a disservice. But that comes at a later point. I know where I stand, I guess tentatively at this moment. I like option 1B4. I want to go to a full cost recovery model with a modernized system, but we have one step that we have to do prior. If that is the will of council, or whatever the will of council is, I think we have to go back and get the proper public engagement on what the rest of the community is. We have some data on the pilot project. Awesome. 10% of people complained of it blowing while it was still full. More people complained, about over 50% complained when it was empty about blowing. So I still think we have to do public engagement with the rest of the community, the other 8,000 people in the community, and see, hey, council is looking at changing this system permanently. So I know a lot of us have sort of chimed in, but that's where I'm at. Let's direct administration to do the next step for public engagement of implementing what we collectively see. And for me, like I said, it's 1B4. And let's go ask the community on what they think about that. Okay, we're looking at a modernized system, no recycling, with commercial and residential waste collection. What do you guys think? Once we get that feedback from the community, which was cut short by COVID for the pilot project in itself, we get a better pulse of the community and we move forward more confidently with our decision. So that's where I would like to go as a council. I'm obviously open to whatever the rest of the council is saying, but I think we have to narrow the focus today and then go do public engagement and then come back at the table and make a final decision. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council, Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I'm very much of the same mindset. I think not even full cost recovery because we're already doing that. I think transparency and those using a service paying for that service, I think is important. And I think that also leads to a more educated conversation in the future if we decide to make significant changes. If our commercial customers are used to paying $143 a month and they know that it is going to cost them $80 a week, we can really have those educated conversations. But right now, no matter what we do, if we were to take commercial waste and do what we do with cardboard, when you just look at it, it's far more expensive, but it's likely a similar price, just it's spread out over different people. So the quicker we can get to a point where people actually understand as part of their utility bills what waste collection actually costs, that will really help educate future conversations and start a dialogue that's really hard to have right now because their costs are just overall part of their taxation. So, thank you.
Any other from council? Councilor Watt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo much of what Councillor Nelson and Mayor Michaels said. I think we do have to narrow the focus somewhat. I do support administration's push to modernize, and I think full cost recovery is the way to go, or as Councillor Nelson said, more of at least get more information out there about what the cost is to deliver this service. I'm not sold on commingle just yet. I think we got a lot of steps to take. I would like to see a lot more public feedback as well to build on the smaller sample that we did get during the pilot project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Waugh. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm of the similar line to everyone else too, regarding the public feedback and getting some additional information about everything. But one of the things that I did want to bring up that's in a little bit different vein is that I would like some input from the rest of council, the ones that have spoken to it. Why 1B4 is preferable over 1B5. I think there's some real advantages into moving towards a contracted commingled recycling program. Takes a significant amount of waste out of the landfill waste stream. There's very little risk to the town by contracting it out. I see that there's some pretty significant benefits there without too many drawbacks. So I'd really like to get the rest of council's input on that, on which way they'd want to go, whether it's with the CMR or without. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Rees?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think public feedback is very important on the waste management side. But when we have this meet with the citizens, what do we say when they ask us, what are we doing with recycling? So how do we have that conversation with them? I don't know what to say. If our engagement is just about waste. So I think if we are planning on engaging the public, I would like to have two conversations and be prepared to talk on waste and be prepared to talk on recycling. Because that's a wonderful opportunity to get a feel for what our citizens want. Yeah, thank you.
I myself and then Councillor Nelson. So just two things. One, I want to speak to Councillor Stashik's question because I too had the same kind of question as to looking at the possibility of contracting the curbside commingling. The first, though, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, we've got a portion of the community that we have done this pilot project with. We have now another, level of community engagement. Just throwing out there. I mean, I'd love to see possibility of. I know at one point in time years ago, but there was a look at volunteer residents taking on some things to get some feedback on. So swapping out the old one in another neighborhood and, spending a month with that one to see what it's like and, whether it's, wintertime, whatever. But, I think there's some great opportunity there for that public engagement to go forward with the modernization. But I hear what Councillor Stashik is saying, and I realize we have some, a private business doing this, but what would it look like to reduce some of the waste in regards to recycling, and what would it look like to have a contract system out there for the commingling recycling? In fact, if I may go a little bit further, I know that you spoke to it about the full contract, services, but potentially I would be personally interested in seeing what that would even look like to hand our waste management over to a contract services. Because this report didn't go into detail of that, but to look at the potential. I know there was some alluding to it, but I'm also curious on to see, because I would like to have that discussion for curbside commingling as well. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a huge opposition to it. Where my concerns lie is looking at a lot of communities in Alberta right now and elsewhere, the understanding that so much of recycling is taking your waste and just moving it somewhere else. There's the international stuff that's been coming, but even for us to transport to Edmonton, then Edmonton doesn't, and then it transfers. There's so much transportation involved with recycling. And I know many communities now are exploring whether it's waste to energy with companies like Waste Away or waste to biofuel with companies like Cielo. There's kind of a new wave of keeping our recycling waste here and dealing with it here and creating value add with those products instead of shipping it somewhere else. So right now, the town has very little invested in recycling. It's contracted privately, or in the case of cardboard, it would be really easy for us to pivot right now as a lot of, it's not even future technologies, it's stuff that's happening, contracts are happening right now. Once we invest in 3,000 bins, another truck, and whether that's through a contractor or not, that's cost is still going to be invested through the community. it's going to make it very difficult to pivot in a year or 2 years or 3 years. So if we're going to have the curbside recycling conversation, I think we should also have a conversation of where recycling is going as an overall industry in Alberta and in Canada, especially for communities that have major transportation costs. One of the things that we haven't talked about tonight is organics, and a lot of that is in order for us to have organics collection and a facility, you have a product that is worth not very much, and in order to sell it, you have to ship it, which actually we would have to pay somebody to use our organics. So there's a really big picture conversation that I think we need to have if we're going to start investing significant money as a municipality on behalf of taxpayers into curbside recycling. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess to speak to Councillor Stashik's question, which is very valid, my rationale is 1B5, the way it's laid out, the municipality would take over recycling through us doing it. So I don't see a fluid option to, unless I'm confused, and this is a lot of information here that's very confusing at times. But 1B4, to me, because of timing and other issues on the back end, as Mr. Hawk alluded to, on what we do with recycling, shipping it out, is the reason I fell on 1B4. 1B5 simply makes us do the service of recycling, which I don't want to do that. The concept is, if we want to deal with recycling, we can have a separate conversation on contracting out recycling if that's the appetite of council. But to me, because we have a truck that from 2016, 2011, 2006, I think, and we have to make a decision in the next little while. If we want to modernize, we can modernize our garbage system and still deal with recycling at another day. And if the appetite is to contract it out, that has nothing to do with our trucks anyways. So conceptually, that's why I'm okay of not touching recycling for quite a while, and deal with our immediate issue, which is commercial residential waste. But I'm open to hearing what the combination of an option 3 and an option 1B4 looks like. I just don't see something that we can't separate. So that's my logic, is we can do some progress with waste management in the next 6 to 12 months, and then in years to come, if there's an appetite, then we deal with recycling. But I just don't see a solution short term that encompasses everything. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Michaels? Councillor Waugh, sorry. Councillor Waugh, and then Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I'll take my kick at the can answering Councillor Stashik's question. To me, I'd like to see us deal with the initial issue, which is modernizing our system a little bit. And then similar to what Mayor Michaels said, there's opportunity to expand that service into the future. And I know it's only a few dollars a month, but I'm also looking ahead to our budget for 2021 and some of the challenges that the community will be facing. And I'm weighing the cost benefit of adding additional service, even if it's only a few dollars a month. I'd really, at this time, I'm really hesitant to add any more financial burden onto the residents of Hinton, even if it is for an incrementally larger service. So that's some of my thoughts. And again, I would like to get more public feedback just about the modernization itself before we go full bore into a recycling service as well, or a curbside model. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Stashik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize.
He'll be back. There he is. He's back.
About that. Sorry, yeah, and my apologies for belaboring the point, but I want to get clarification from administration just one more time. Sorry, am I still there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're here.
Okay. And it's regarding, I asked for the clarification about recycling options A and B because I wanted clarification. My understanding from Mr. Hawk was that recycling done in-house through the commingled collection for residential users wasn't feasible, that the only way that we were going to be able to do curbside recycling was through contracting it out. Is that correct, first off?
Mr. Chair, yes, as I mentioned, as we don't have the required infrastructure locally and the risk associated with us transferring from here to a recycling facility, that's why it's not feasible at this time to launch the recycling in-house. So currently we have the one street facility where you can, any people can bring their recycling material, and we are shipping it from here to Addison District Recycling Society. So at this time, our annual average recycling cost is $368,000, which we are providing a very, very high level partial service, not a complete recycling service.
Thank you. If I could follow up then, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's what I had thought that you'd stated, and I'm glad I understood. So to me, part of the modernization of a waste management system is to take landfill waste out of the stream and repurpose it in some other way. So whether it's recycled, whether it's reused, whether it's as Councillor Nelson said, being put towards another purpose, potentially not recycled, but not buried in the ground. This is something that as a councillor and a private citizen, I've heard from citizens in Hinton forever. When are we going to get a recycling program in Hinton that's universal, that everyone has access to? I think right now, through this modernization process, we have an opportunity to be able to get a curbside recycling program up and running in Hinton at a nominal cost that's universally available. I think it's an opportunity, and it would be an unfortunate missed opportunity if we didn't take advantage of it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much everything everybody says. The amount of money we spend on a recycling center, repurposing that. I really would look forward to separating and simplifying the conversations. We've seen a lot of feedback on the modernizing of waste because of the recycling component, and really they're two very separate conversations. And although they work kind of in unison as maybe part of a bigger strategy that we don't have, and maybe we're working on the fly, which is fine. But the thing we need to deal with is modernizing our waste. I'm saying they'd rather deal with that, and then either in parallel or at a later time deal with recycling, so that we can have two really robust conversations. Because to me, unless we are unless we're doing the recycling in-house, as Mayor Michael said, it's a very separate conversation. And I think really focusing our outreach as council on the specifics, and if tonight we can really narrow down what we're looking for and get rid of half of that flow chart, then we come back around again. We're having better numbers to compare and better conversations because it's a lot less information. Right now, as a councillor, I was relatively overwhelmed with the amount of options and information. I can only imagine as a citizen trying to have a brief 5-minute look at it, how difficult it would be. So to me tonight, if we can focus it down to what we're doing and the timing for modernizing waste, and then potentially when we want to address recycling, I think then we're able to have really good conversations with citizens and make a decision that's pretty sound and takes the municipality where it needs to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This isn't a direction yet, but this is sort of what I'm thinking based on what I'm hearing, and I'll look for feedback from council, and if so, I or anyone else can make that direction. But I'm thinking we need something like direct administration to conduct public engagement on the potential change to a modernized residential and commercial waste collection service, excluding recycling, and bring back a report to a future standing committee. This, and I'd speak further to it in the sense that, whether I want council to be involved in this, like whether it's setting up at Parks West Mall or setting up in the Valley, going in 2-3 strategic locations in town, getting feedback from administration's help and council's help. This is, I think, that the data that everyone's alluding to, getting that information from the community, knowing what the pulse is, will better help us make that leap forward, whether it's full cost recovery, what its specifics are, but getting some confirmation on the modernized system. So I think for today, that's a step that's big enough to just let's start the public engagement right now, and let's reconvene in a few months after we have that info and make a decision for a community that our community wants. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support what you just said there if there was an and postpone the recycling conversation to the 2021 budget talks, or just get to ensure that we are going to have that conversation about recycling.
So if I may, and that's why I put exclude recycling. I think in hearing all 7 or all 6 of us here today, there's an appetite to get information on the modernized system. And as Councillor Nelson and other councillors alluded to, we cannot convolute this conversation too much. I want to stay focused on the deliverable of the public engagement is to get to the other 80% of the community that wasn't part of the pilot program to say, hey, we're looking at a modernized system and this includes this, and this, and let's deal with that. If there's another motion after to direct administration to bring a future conversation on recycling, I'm glad to have that dialogue, but I do not want to do what we have in this report, albeit very, very thorough and a lot of information. Let's separate the two, and that's why I don't want to have anything tied to that. So, thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, I too feel the same way as Councilor Reese. I think I agree with the direction potentially put forward, to have that conversation on the modernization of our solid waste. But then I would like to see, that there is direction that we do have that conversation on what are our options with recycling, whether it be in-house, whether it be contract. I think it's an opportunity, as Councillor Stashik said, that I think we can take a look at. I do, though, I just want to, it was a lot of information, but I do appreciate because it also has narrowed it down to give us a better look at it. I compare a lot of times to the bus one that we had. We got to look at all our options, to figure out what might be best for this, whether in that case it was, get rid of the bus system, and the people said, no, it's not. So, but it's, I think we need to have all that information, all those options to kind of narrow it down where we want to get it to. So I appreciate that information. So I would be in favor of that, and I would be also in favor definitely if someone had another direction after that with recycling. So thank you. Councillor Nelson.
This will probably end up being a couple questions, but just a clarification question. We currently own more bins than we're using for our pilot project, correct? Like we had to buy 600 and something.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, we purchased, because of truckload, we purchased, I believe, 624 bin, and out of which I think we are, at this time, we are using 496 or 452 bins. So we have some.
If I could follow up, Councillor Haas?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. So I think with that, if we're looking for more information through public engagement, I think including somewhere in that direction or another direction is and implement the remaining bins, just where feasible for administration, like wherever it makes sense to utilize them. I think, even if you're going from 450 to over 600, that's another 150 citizens or households that we can get feedback from, and less wear and tear on the bins. And to me, why not? To me, if we're not using them, it's because the pilot has been a failure and they're horrible, which is not the case. So why not expand it that incremental amount while now versus waiting until later? So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson, and thank you for that. I think it's a great opportunity to get them out there. And if I may, to kind of build, and I'm not trying to get into the weeds, but one of the things that came up in the conversation and when we had the open houses was areas that are not cul-de-sacs, but kind of one-way streets, but have a houses in the middle of the street and then on the outside. So, for example, on my street, the truck goes around twice. They grab what's in the middle and then they grab what's on the outside. Those might be opportunities where those middle houses go, put them on, so that truck only has to go around once, and we just try and put them on the other side of the street. But maybe there's some other ways that we can do some cost effectiveness, and I think this is a great opportunity, like as Councilor Nelson said, we've got those other bins out there, and to get that feedback from other communities and to see if there's other options out there. So I think there'd be appetite for people to try that out. So excellent. All right. So any other, I guess, questions or direction? Or Michaels or anyone else?
Yeah, I'll put forward that direction when Wendy is ready. Direct administration to conduct public engagement on the potential change to a modernized residential and commercial waste collection service excluding recycling, and to use the rest of the toter bins. Can you say toter bins? Toter? It's toter, right? Toter bins. And bring back a report to a future standing committee. And needless to say, I'm amenable to any other specific changes. I tried to add everything in there that I could. I'll open up the council also for timing. I didn't put a date there. I don't know how timely we want it. I'd like to hear from other councilors if they want a specific date, but at least we have something started. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. All right, council, any discussion on this direction? Yes.
My question is actually more around the public engagement. Considering social distancing and all of those things right now, the viability of hosting some of the more traditional open houses, whether it's here, might not be viable. I'm just curious if we might want to give administration a little bit more direction as to what public engagement we would be happy with. That kind of meets some of the challenges we have right now, so that they don't do public engagement and then come back and we say, well, that wasn't enough. So, thank you.
See you, Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just gauging from the conversation, it sounds like this is something that council wishes to be a part of, the engagement activities, to have a role in that. I think back to the town hall meeting we had last fall, and though that's not a potential option for us at this point with the pandemic, there are options for virtual town hall meetings and other things that we can explore that might satisfy that. Allow council to receive questions from the public, allow administration to do some proactive communications around that to facilitate a good discussion. But that's what I'm sensing from the conversation, but if clearer direction needs to be provided to administration, that's okay too.
Mayor Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, CEO Olson, for that. I don't know what council deems comfortable. There's one recommendation I would like to do collectively as a council, and I think due to the weather and the restrictions of COVID, is we have something either at Mary Reimer or at Green Square, an outdoor space where we can social distance a bit more, and if the problem arises that we have too many people, that we have over 200 people that come, then that's a good problem to have, and we'll call bylaw immediately for them to come, which is, that would be the case. But I think an outdoor event, and I know we'll have to really watch the temperature, whether it's going to rain or whatever, but to me, that would be one of the engagements that I would want to direct administration to do is one outdoor event to get engagement from our citizens in the coming weeks, let's say the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may also, and this is just, I currently am attending a whole different type of training where it's sections of training on a public engagement. And one of the things that I've learned early into it is the public engagement we do when council is present. It's very important that all of council is present and not just some of council, because having those engagements with council, having those side conversations with council members is not giving a good outlook on it, because that councillor had that conversation. So it's important that if we are going to do it, public engagement, the recommendation is if all of council can't be present, then it's better that administration are having those conversations and they are bringing back that information to all of council, so all of council has that information, because the felt is it's not true public engagement when only individual councillors have those individual conversations. So I would see if we're there, even just being part of it and seeing administration, but hearing what people have to say as opposed to us being, engaging the public so much, right? So that's one of the high recommendations of the training, and I plan on bringing it forward, but to get that every councillor has that information. So it's just something that I wanted to throw out there for future public engagements. The other thing I was thinking in my head is outdoor, but we also could potentially set up where the Hinton Center has different breakout rooms, potentially smaller groups, maybe splitting up the room, still can social distance in those rooms, but having one way in, one way out. I mean, it would take a little bit more, but it's a larger space that we can also utilize and break up into smaller groups as well. So I think there's lots of different opportunities for sure for that public engagement that we can do. So. Sorry, Councillor Issy.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. So we have a motion on the floor. Am I able to ask a recycling question, or does it have to pertain to the motion?
This direction is on waste management excluding recycling. So I think if there's another direction that comes after it on recycling, that would probably be more appropriate for that. Yeah, that would be my thought. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so and the reason part is because it is public engagement part of this direction, and I think having this conversation. So, Mayor Michaels.
Mr. Chair, to Councillor Nelson's point, and if there's other councillors who want to sort of chime in, it gave me the idea that if we do an outdoor one, great, or do we go with what we've been doing for the last 4 months? Do we want to, like a Zoom meeting where we have a facilitator from the town, get the feedback from all the individuals. We set up a date, an Eventbrite, whatever means. I would be comfortable with that, and then anything else administration want to do, perhaps it's adding to the current direction, public engagement, including one online engagement and one outdoor engagement, and whatever else. If we're comfortable, but obviously waiting to hear from everyone if they're against that or for that.
If I may, I mean, Zoom has actually shown a lot greater abilities for people to access the meetings and to be part of them. And it's been shown in many different venues through COVID. So I would agree. I think we actually would get potentially more input from a Zoom meeting than we would potentially from an outdoor one or an event, because people don't have to plan for it so much. They can be anywhere and do it. So I would be favor of that, even if we didn't have COVID. I think it's something that we need to consider doing on a regular basis as well. So, Council, is there any more on this direction? Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support the proposed motion. I support everything in it, including the modernized waste management system and utilizing the rest of the toter bins. But I just can't support it because I think it's a huge missed opportunity to engage in a public information exercise and to leave people's thoughts and feelings about recycling alongside waste management out of the conversation. I don't see why it can't be part of the conversation, part of the information gathering. It all flavors the same discussion, so I can't support the motion as worded. Thank you.
So I mean, I hear what you're saying. So if it would be possible, what I'm hearing Councillor Stashik say is we've got the audience having the opportunity to then pick their brains and survey them on recycling. We could have that potentially as two separate discussions, right? Let's talk about this and then get your thoughts on that. So I agree, it's a good opportunity. We've already got them there. I mean, unless or if we are and there's no direction on that yet, but if there was direction to come follow that after this one on specifically looking at then the conversation of recycling and engaging the public on that matter, would that be an option, Councillor Stashik, that would be more amenable to you? And I'm posing the question to you.
I'm certainly looking forward to a motion that gets made, but unfortunately, right now, there's nothing on the table that addresses that. And this is the motion that we're discussing right now, so.
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Mayor Michaels?
Mr. Chair, and if council is okay with it, I'd like to change my motion or add to it. Wendy, direct administration to conduct public engagement including an online session and an in-person session, and then so on. And if I could speak to it, it just gives some direction, some clarity. And I know people are nodding their heads a bit, but then we know we'll at least have something online that administration could craft, and something in person, whether it is outside or not outside, but it could be still in the mall or it could be in the valley. And I think it brings together the specifics that what I've heard from other councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. All right. Any other, Councillor Risk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally think it's a missed opportunity not having that conversation on waste management and recycling. And if we got together, had that meeting, you know what? We may have citizens say to us, you know, we like how recycling is right now. Don't change it. Don't do a thing. But without having that conversation, we don't know. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Risk. Councillor Watt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just wanted to clarify with Mayor Michaels. What is the public info or feedback session supposed to be narrowed down to? There's nothing in there. Is it about all the information that's been provided to us? Or is there a couple of particular options that you want discussed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll speak to that and then perhaps hand it over to CAO Olson. Residential commercial waste collection service, the modernized version. Now, how they deliver it, and that I'll hand over to Ms. Olson. But we all talked about there's an interest in modernizing it, but we want feedback. And I'm open. If council is comfortable making a decision today or a direction that says we want to do modernization, great. Let's have that conversation and see if we pass that today. But the purpose of this is to get the engagement and feedback on the modernization system in itself. But if there's appetite, and I didn't hear that before from council to absolutely move down that avenue, then I could retract this. But I clearly sense, I thought that there was an appetite to modernize it, but we weren't sure. So that's the concept, is to go to the public and say, hey, we are looking to go down this system. And before we change our entire system that we've done for decades, we want your feedback and your involvement to see what we're overlooking, what we're not seeing. And that's really it. So I hope that answers it. And I don't know if, I don't want to put CA Olson on the spot, but the way it's delivered, I would assume would get that information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that clarification. Actually, I was under the impression that we were moving ahead with engagement on 1B4 only. So looking at, and I mean, without having prepared an engagement plan on that, I don't know what that would look like exactly to adjust the full cost piece. If it's council's wish to discuss modernization only, that really pertains to the bins. As the rest of the collection program remains the same, really, the frequency of pickup. It's really just the bin that we would be talking to the entire community about, unless there's questions that council has that they need public input to answer that would help them choose one of the options within that modernized waste collection system over another. So that could be price point, the willingness to pay an increase, to assume that full cost, that sort of thing. So that's kind of how I envision us approaching that engagement.
Is that the intent?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Oh, Councilor Reese.
Thank you. Okay, so, thank you, Mr. Chair. We had the pilot project. It appears that it was successful. The people there are okay with it. So now we're gonna go and talk to people who weren't part of the pilot project and ask them for their thoughts. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I am open to whatever the will of council, but we are at a crossroads on deciding whether we want to modernize our system. If a councillor believes that they want to modernize the system, then say it, and then I could potentially support that, because I said that's what I want. But I still think we should go to the public, even though they're not part of the pilot. A pilot is obviously just a section, a fraction of the of usually the full service. But if we're comfortable moving forward without getting any consultation from the public on changing our whole system, then say that. But that's the purpose. The concept is, hey, we're going to change all your bins. We're going to have smaller bins potentially. I know you haven't experienced them. There has been a pilot project in the valley. You can speak to people there, but I'm not comfortable moving forward yet asking to move forward with a modernized system without getting feedback. That's all. It's just that I don't know how better to explain it. Thank you.
Councilor Nelson.
So I just have a question that I think I made an assumption on, and I just want to clarify. If we go to a full cost recovery model, people will be billed as part of their utility bills, both residential and commercial, and would not be part of general taxation, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, currently our waste collection service is being subsidized by general tax. So the whole concept of full cost recovery, that you will pay for your service. This is just the start point, like the water, the other utility, same, but we have to start somewhere. And as I mentioned earlier, I think in one of the meeting, that currently our residential is partially subsidizing our commercial, and in general, the overall program is subsidized by general tax.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair? Mm-hmm. So I think that's almost for me the bigger part of the public engagement than the actual. I think the modernization makes sense in every way. It's going to reduce waste. The bins are cheaper. They're easier. Like the wear and tear on the vehicles, all of that stuff just makes a lot of sense. It's really important before the budget process and before we get to our finalizing a budget that we start this conversation about what the budget is going to look like once we take something that used to be in operating costs and now it's part of your utility bill. If we look at what the town of Edson did, which was they just took their recycling and moved it out of general taxation and put it onto utility bills, there's a lot of pushback from the community just because it wasn't communicated well enough and people didn't have a heads up that, oh, great, we saved money we had a 0% increase in taxation this year, but it was because they pulled recycling out of general taxation and put it onto utility. So I think starting that conversation is probably the most important part of all this with citizens, so that when we get into budget, we're not having both conversations simultaneously, because the earlier we can talk about, it's not going to save them money, it's just going to be charged them in a different manner, I think is really important. So that is more my reason for public engagement than the actual program itself, because the program itself to me is kind of a no-brainer when you're just looking at the waste collection portion of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. I believe Ms. Fox had, yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair, through to Council. So just, I know there's been some talk in around cost recovery, and that the waste collection or what's presented as cost recovery, everything is always cost recovery, which it's a little bit misleading. The way that the financials are set up for a municipality is that waste, sewer, and wastewater are set up as a fee for service and are not meant to be subsidized by taxation. So just for that clarity piece, what we're trying to achieve is what we should be doing. We probably as administration would not recommend doing anything other than cost recovery, because it becomes very burdensome to try and deal with taxation and what we need to do with taxation when it's intermixed with our fee for service. So I just wanted to add that clarification. And the only other piece I would state is there has not been a lot of mention from the HR perspective and finance perspective, just in regards to the amount of injuries and claims that we have with our current system, and it's our obligation, and I feel obliged to say something on behalf of health and safety, just because I'm the director of health and safety for the town, that we have to address the health and safety first of our workers. So the part of the push and the reason for modernization is to ensure that we're looking at that issue. So I know it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes for change, but there's a lot of important reasons internally to change what we're doing right now. So I just wanted to put that piece out there, and I didn't want to add on to what Mr. Hawk is doing. So thank you.
If I may, and I think all of this, and to Councilor Grace, your question, and I realize, I think I know we did a pilot, then we're doing, but it's not, it's engagement, but it's also an opportunity for education to understand that this is why we're looking at this. This is the benefits of health and safety. This is the benefits financially. It's an opportunity for the public to understand what Councilor Nelson was bringing up. So I think it's I think it's important that we do that public engagement to get that feedback, to get their thoughts on it, but also to be able to inform our citizens of why we're looking at doing this. So I think it's the next steps. The pilot, the Stardusty, gave us the opportunity to learn something from it, and then now we're looking at this, and these are the reasons for it. So because I think, if I may, the majority of the community that I saw personally and talked to were people that were in East Hardisty the pilot was going to affect. The rest of the community wasn't as interested at the time. Now we're looking at doing it for the rest of the community. So I think it's important that we have that, and I think Mayor Michaels, that 6 to 7 weeks is a reasonable amount of time to get that out there and to get this, moving for these reasons stated. So, Mayor Michaels.
Thanks you, Mr. Chair. To Councillor Nelson's point, and I'm open to that, depending on what the rest of council thinks, opening the scope a bit and adding the full cost recovery, I have no problem with it. To me, like I said, the scope was too big before with recycling and things of that nature. If we're trying to get information in the next few months on this, if adding full cost recovery and seeing what people think about that, because that changes the impact on where their taxation dollars are, I have no problem adding that into the scope. And I thank CEO Olson for getting that clarity, or that clarity earlier on this motion. So if there's no objection from other councillors, and I'll wait to hear from them, I will add that part of full cost recovery in a moment.
Any objections, Councillor Waugh?
No objections. I was just hoping to speak to the issue. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, by all means, please.
Okay.
All right.
For me, I would echo what Councillor Nelson said. I think for a lot of the reasons that were stated by Ms. Fox and earlier by Mr. Hawk, I think modernization is the direction we need to go. And I think that's probably something council has to take upon itself. Now, some of the nuances like curbside or full cost or future cost, I think some of those things we should be taken to the public. One is an education piece, and two, to kind of get the flavor of what they'd like to see. Whether I agree or disagree with any of the options or not, but I think it's our job at least to narrow that scope. And I think modernization is definitely a direction we need to go in. And then what some of the nuances and options look like, we can leave for public information and public feedback to narrow that scope even further. And that's what I'd like to see from the next 6-7 weeks of this feedback process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wong. Councillor Sashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, very much in line with what Councillor Wong and Councillor Nelson had said. The more this public engagement exercise got kicked around and discussed, the less I supported it. Confining the discussion to, hey, do you want to have a modernized waste management system? That doesn't have a whole bunch of benefit that I can see. It's not a matter of do you want one, we have to do one. It's been told to us many, many times, it's not an economically sustainable system that we currently have. We have to change the system. So if there's some public engagement about how do you want to change the system, what do you want to be included, what do you want to see as part of the new system, and that's why I was so adamant that recycling be part of the discussion. To me, it's all part and parcel of the same thing. So I haven't changed my opinion. I'm still not going to support this original motion, but I do very much think that if
I do very much think, I'm gonna keep that in my head, that's where you
yeah, sorry about that. But I very much do believe that if it does pass, that the scope definitely needs to be broadened. The discussion needs to be more about the costs and the hows and the whats than just do you want to do it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Michaels?
Yeah, Wendy, I'd like to add after waste collection service and full cost recovery. And if I may, yeah, this is the purpose of the discussion. And at the end of the day, if this doesn't pass, what do we collectively want to do? Like I said, I haven't, I want to be able to pass something that gets to our goal of communicating and hearing from the public on this big decision. So if there's something else that needs to be part of this, I know recycling was brought up, but if there's anything else because for myself, I don't support having recycling part of this, but it could be a separate motion after. This is the opportunity. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So the implication of delaying making the decision for modernization will impact our operation. So that council knows, because of the condition of our truck is not that great. So we are struggling to keep it maintained and keep continue. So if for a decision whether public wants the modernization system or not, there are some, the delay is one of the consequences, the risk that we will be bearing. And the other risk that if through the engagement, if the general publics, don't support the modernization, and at that time if council move not to modernize, then there will be some throwaway cost. So that council, like we spent plus minus $65,000 for the new bins and a retrofit of one of the existing truck. If we need to go back to the old system because of public's input, then that money will be throwaway cost, unless we can continue to use that bad shape truck for particular community.
Please say it, Wilson. Sorry, I was thinking.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think to kind of summarize what the direction that I'm hearing this conversation go in is less about a full public engagement exercise and more about educating the community on really what amounts to 1B4 as per Mayor Michael's potential motion. So it's more of an education around what that would look like, and their feedback could be provided through that education session. So there's still an opportunity to kind of collect on and understand how the community is understanding and receiving that. But it sounds like council is interested in the modernization and is not interested in status quo at this point, and that the feedback that's received wouldn't necessarily change that position. That's to summarize what I'm hearing at this point.
If I may say, that for me summarizes really well. I don't think we have a choice but to modernize. I think it's like as Councilor Nelson earlier said, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It's just, it's whether or not it's that 1B4, whatever, but that's just for me personally. The rest of you feel like. Anyone else? Oh, sorry.
So, I don't know, again, I don't want to engage myself in any debate on this. However, if councils will to approve administration to modernize the system, the committee can recommend council to move forward with modernizing so that we can start our process. And for the rest, like whether it will be a flat fee, whether it will be a full cost recovery, whether those we can engage through the engagement. We can bring back further report. For those purposes, still we can continue to collect the flat fee, whatever the 933 bylaw allows us to collect. And until council, there will be few steps. Like first of all, council has to approve whether a full cost recovery or a flat fee, and then after that we have to bring back the bylaw amendment to reflect to that. So at this time, if we can at least get the direction to modernize the system, then at least we can start the process, because the purchase of the truck or the other beams and everything is kind of on hold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. One, I know there's going to be some lost cost in this potentially if hypothetically we don't go to a modernized system, but that wasn't a decision of council, right? We did a pilot project within the current the budget that we had. That's the risk of doing a pilot project, and using that philosophy, we should have just did the whole town if we were not concerned with what people think. But going back to 4 or 5 months ago, this is an opportunity for people to just voice their concern. They want to be part of the decision, and in the past, by not getting any engagement on something that even though we think is right, but not to give them an opportunity outside of council, because let's be frank, no one comes to council. We have 3-4 people that usually come into to watch council in person. On Zoom, it's maybe a handful. People are not engaged that way. So unless we fix that problem, this is just an opportunity to say, this is what we are going to do. And like I said, to the other point, I don't want to not do this because, well, we've already invested money. That is irrelevant to me, whether we've invested money. Otherwise, we already said the okay to do it then, right? Because that would be setting ourselves up to say we have to say yes now. So, and that wasn't, to my knowledge, the intent of council before having the pilot project. The pilot project was a pilot project, and let's play this out fully and get that feedback from the community. And I'm predicting, and I said 1B4 is my preference, that will be the case, but let's open the opportunity to our citizens to give their feedback so they feel and know that they are part of this decision and we don't overlook something. Thanks.
Thank you, and if I may also too, I think right now we pose it to the community. I don't, honestly, I believe that the community is going to say, you know, modernizing is important, seeing that all the put out. The major conversation that we're seeing actually just currently is around recycling. There wasn't a lot of feedback on that. So I don't think, honestly, that and I appreciate the intent, you know, administration, you know, but with the health and safety and everything, but I think taking a few weeks just to educate the public on this, I would hope is not going to derail this project. You know, I think the bigger conversation will be if the motion or direction is on that recycling component of it. I think we're going to get pretty good feedback, and I'm just saying on the waste management part of it. But the bigger conversation will be on the recycling at some point if we have that public engagement. So. Okay, council, so anything else or for administration? So we do have a motion. So if we could see the motion, Wendy, so we can all see it and.
You won't see it unless, because if I share it, then it doesn't show up on this.
Okay, well, however you did it before where I could read it, or how does that
I don't
work?
know if I'm gonna do that, because if I pull it and it'll.
Yeah.
No, on your.
Yeah.
There, it's based on, okay.
Perfect. This is, we've had a few amendments to it, so I guess we want to, everybody,
Okay, that's what I thought.
oh, what happened?
I can't pull that over.
That didn't work?
So,
Okay, can you, I guess I can read it out if you may, or, what's that?
I can stop sharing, just if everyone's had an opportunity to look at it, I'll stop sharing, and then I can.
Okay. All right, so we have a direction, thank you. That committee direct administration to conduct public engagement, including an online session and an in-person session on the potential change to a modernized residential and commercial waste collection service and full cost recovery, excluding recycling, and to use the rest of the toter bins and bring back a report to the future standing committee meeting. Yeah. Do we want to, I mean, is it possible to put a date on it, maybe some of the things to, you know, have some clarity on when we might be seeing this, or, and that's just a question out to administration. I'd look to you for input on that. If possible. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, this is something that administration, for some of the reasons that Mr. Hawk mentioned, would seek to engage in, plan for and engage in sooner rather than later. Also recognizing the fact that over the summer months, it's more difficult to do engagement and to get that, to reach the people that we need to, I suppose. This is something that likely would take place in August, potentially towards the end of that month. I think it's fair to say that we would bring a report back to council no later than the end of September, but looking at bringing it forward as soon as we're able to.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes, thanks for bringing that up. Seeing that, looking at the dates for our standing committee meetings, we only have one more in July, and we have one which is August 25th, and then it's September 8th. So I'd be comfortable tying a September 8th date, because I do understand that there are consequences to delaying this, but at the end of the day, we only have one other regular in July, which was next week. So unless there was appetite to make a final decision by next week, which I didn't sense that, we only have August 17th. So to me, I'd like to add that the date is no later than September 8th, standing committee. And at the end of the day, like I said, it's all about scope and expectation, and it's getting, you know, something online and something in public, and we adjust according to the timelines that we have, and it's still better than nothing in my mind. And then at least on September 8th, we know we're in a better position. We make a final decision on this, you know, effective September 15th potentially. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for some clarification around that report and what it looks like, the report itself would include the engagement results Is there anything further that council would expect in that report? Would it be any additional information on one option over another, or just strictly what the community is feeling around what's included in the motion?
I have nothing.
Okay. Councillor Nelson and Councillor Waugh, Councillor Reyes.
The only thing that could be a separate agenda item even is basically what we saw today, but with everything else removed so that we're focusing. And whether that, I just wonder if through that engagement, having that standing, the revised document with a little bit less information might be of value a week before it coming to regular for decision. It might just be an opportunity to have a little bit better conversation. And so that to me isn't any extra information. It's the information we have just reduced to the scope that we've outlined tonight.
Anyone else? Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess the only thing I'd like to see included in that, just so that it's in writing somewhere, was some of the information that Mr. Hawk provided about the costs for commercial customers if they had to obtain waste collection services from a private entity. Thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because this is going to affect a bylaw, should we move this to regular, we'll have to have a public hearing on this, will we? Or not?
I think the bylaw process would come after the approval, so we wouldn't prepare any amendments to the bylaw until we know what we're amending.
Yeah, but should we choose to move ahead with this, then we would have to give first reading.
At a future date,
Yes.
after the approval happens. So that would be part of, I suppose, the report that comes to council with that information, including those next steps.
So that would probably move us into October. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we have a direction on the floor. And it's been amended now for a date, so I'm just going to reread quickly. The committee direct administration to conduct public engagement, including an online session and an in-person session on the potential change to a modernized residential and commercial waste collection service and full cost recovery excluding recycling, and to use the rest of the total bins and bring back a report no later than the September 8th, 2020 standing committee meeting. There. All right, so I'm going to call this one to question now. We've had quite a bit of time to discuss it, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. 3-3. 4 was Councillor Nelson, Mayor Michaels, and myself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Nelson.
I guess I'll make the motion, or give the direction that the committee recommends to direct administration to implement full cost recovery full cost recovery residential and commercial waste collection. And if I can speak to it, if we're not going to do public engagement on it, but we believe as council that it should be moving forward, which I believe it is, I think we're ready to implement it, and I would look forward to a secondary motion to follow this that talks about ensuring there's education and some feedback going back to citizens. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Sorry, and for clarification, that's basically the, was it 1B? 1B4, I think?
Yeah.
And it does not include recycling. But again, people can make a future motion to do something else with recycling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. All right, so we have direction. Councillor Waugh. I caught him. Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify with Councillor Nelson, because you had mentioned 1B4. So are you proposing modernization within that as well? Because it's just not stated anywhere.
Correct. And if we need to add that, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be speaking in favor of this motion either for the same reasons I wasn't in favor of the other one. I think leaving the curbside recycling out of the discussion is a missed opportunity, so I can't support this option. Thank you.
Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be supporting this option. As Councillor Nelson said, there's no appetite to get the public engagement. And like I say, I personally like 1B4. We try to get as much input. I may not support this in regular based on the input I get from the community, because a lot of people may be a little bit surprised that we're changing their whole system in all the other communities, but I'll try to reach out to as many people as I can. But I support it in principle, coming to regular to make a decision. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Nelson.
Just want to confirm, this direction does not preclude council from making any direction they wish around recycling, correct?
I would say so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and I too, I would like to have a little, I think it's the right thing to do. I am in favor of it. I do look forward to seeing what the community says, but I do hope that there is some discussion in the future on recycling. You know, I think as Councillor Stashik alludes, I think it's an opportunity we need to look at. But I think it's the best thing to do is to modernize it. It's most cost effective. It's also health and safety issues that have been, and the surveys and everything, feedback from the pilot project were positive. There were, of course, there was the few, but nothing outstanding. So I'll be speaking in favor of this. So thank you. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not support this. I do want to say, though, that Mayor Michaels made an awesome motion, but neglected one word, and that was recycling. So that whole conversation, if it would have included that one word, we would have a motion that I think would have passed, and we would have been taking it somewhere. So I'm going to try to remember word for word what your motion was, and just include recycling. Thank you.
But if I may, I'll put myself in the list. It doesn't preclude we having that conversation. We were just, I think the original one was not having it at the same time, looking at it as two separate conversations. So I do hope, as Councillor Nelson alluded, that maybe there might be a direction to come forward after this one. So, but I just think it's the best thing to do for the community when it comes to the modernization of it. So, of waste, solid waste management. Councillors.
I just got to add this. We struggle getting 5 people to show up and give us their input. So if we're asking them 2 times to show up, oh my God. So, you know, one public engagement, asking for their thoughts on our, waste management and recycling, and let those.
Okay. So we're talking about this one right now,
Yes,
but
yes.
Councillor Nelson.
Okay, this is us directing council to make the decision,
Yeah.
not for us to do public engagement first.
I've
So
got you.
the struggling to get 5 people in this model isn't really that important. We'll do some education as far as probably some paperwork and newspaper articles about what's doing, similar to probably how we did it for the pilot project, and that's just fine. So this is us just making the decision without the public engagement first, which I'm largely comfortable doing because it doesn't include recycling. So, and keep in mind, if you want to amend it to say and bring, you're more than welcome to also add an amendment or an addition to the motion. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we got a direction with Wendy.
One
Oh,
clarification.
yes.
Councilor Nelson, you did request that modernize the waste collection system.
Yeah,
Okay.
so full cost recovery and modernization.
The other way around. Whatever. Yeah, whatever works. As long as it's in there. Or is there any? Oh, okay. Yep. All right, everybody. So we got a motion or a direction on the to consider that committee recommends council direct administration to implement full cost recovery for residential and commercial waste collection and modernization of the waste collection system. I'm going to call that the question. All those in favor? And there's 4, and all those opposed? And 2. And that passes. Thank you. And appreciate the debate on this issue, I think, and the clarification. Council, any other matters on this topic of waste, solid waste management? Councilor Reyes.
I would like to make a direction. Will you help me out on this?
I think Wendy.
Is it the same one?
It is, I'll read it.
Can you bring the,
Sorry?
can you bring the same? It's, there's a change. Okay, I'll just copy it and.
So the only change here would be including recycling options. There we go.
Councilor,
Did you want to speak to it? Sorry.
No, I think I have.
Yes. If I could, we've now recommended the council implement or directs to implement. So we can't necessarily make a motion that is about potential implementation because we've already directed to implement and already. So I think within implementation, the toter bins would be used because we're implementing. So I feel like it's not really a valid recommendation because it contradicts what was just passed.
So your previous conversation was, if anybody wants to make a direction after this one moves ahead, they sure can. So would you like to help me clean up that one?
go ahead.
Yeah, I think maybe just spell it like if we're looking at, if you're looking to get public feedback on recycling, then we just make a direction to get public feedback on recycling, because we've now moved past getting the public feedback prior to implementation of waste collection, right? So it'd be just something specific to public engagement on recycling, from what I understand.
So if we can bring that back up and then clean it up.
So I'm just gonna bring it onto the screen now.
So if I may, do we want, so recycling options, do we want to limit it to curbside recycling? Do you want to limit, because I mean, there's lots of probably different ideas, but pick up, curbside, pick up the.
Yeah, but I think recycling options would include that whole big picture.
Well, as long as we, I guess, have that conversation with the administration of what that public engagement
Yeah.
wanting to
Can I say more?
Yeah, please.
You know, I hear what you're saying, but wouldn't this be a perfect opportunity if we're going to engage the public in regards to recycling, that we also engage them in the waste management side too? You know, like why not combine the two?
It was directly
Yeah.
because it was voted down.
Yeah.
So it was voted against. So now we've recommended that we move forward with implementation, not public engagement. So we can talk to people as much as we want about it, but we're already recommending that we implement. So if we wanted to do the public engagement for recycling and waste collection, that was voted down. So we're beyond that, and now we're at the stage of going straight to implementation, which I think is fine too. And there could be some more one-way education around it, which would be typical of anything that administration takes on. So
Okay, so could that one-way communication be part of the engagement when we talk to them about recycling?
Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My rationale, and that's why I voted in favor of the second motion, was if there's no engagement, then that's the will of council, and we move forward with the will of council, which is to implement. So in 7 days, we may vote in favor of having a model. So any engagement on something after the fact would be disingenuous. You know what I mean? So that's the concept. In 7 days from now, we'll be in a regular meeting. And that's why I supported. There's no engagement, fine. That's that's the will of council. But I do support the modernization, and 7 days from now we will have it. So that's the logic that I'm using, and why I don't think it could work to have any engagement on it.
Just to add to that, I think I was confused because when the second motion came forward, it was my understanding that we still would have that opportunity to take that information to the public and have a talk so they would know all about it. So that's, on me, that's my fault. I misunderstood when you said that a motion could come, another one could be brought forward that could include public engagement. But there we go.
Okay. So if I may, on the direction, I'll be speaking in favor of this. I think it's an opportunity. Timeline wise, I think, we've got, I think this is something that can wait a little bit to put it together properly. But I think it's important that we have that conversation with our community members, get that public feedback on what recycling might look like in our community moving forward, especially to, potentially passing the modernization of it. Like, what could it look like with the modernization of our solid waste management? So I'll be speaking in favor of this for sure. I think it's a great conversation that we had in our community. So, Councillor Nelson.
A couple thoughts, and it actually could affect the way that I vote on it. It would be a time frame, and to me, we're now looking to implement a modernized waste collection, and I would rather have that implemented and the communications go out around that and have that solidified, and have the recycling conversation once the rollout and the modernization has been complete, so that we can start and finish one conversation. And then once we've kind of settled on that and the community is comfortable with where we're at, then looking at, especially because one doesn't affect the others because it'd be contracted out anyways. I think waiting until the implementation of the modernized program would be the right time to start the recycling conversation, rather than implementing one thing and talking about a different thing in an overlapping fashion. I think we just add the confusion that I think is led to us talking about this for 2 hours tonight. So yeah, if there's a time frame that is contingent on something else or even a date, that would likely affect how I vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
I certainly, if council doesn't mind, would like to add to my motion that the discussion is held before the end of the first quarter, 2021. Just as long as it's on the books that we're gonna have this discussion.
And I guess is that, before I say, is that, what kind of time frame potentially would we be looking at as a modernization to have it solidified? Is that a reasonable time frame that we could then transition from having this now done to, as Councillor Newsom was saying, having, that separate conversation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, we have to wait for full council approval.
Right.
Before we move forward with any activity of the modernization. Except maybe we will start implementing the remaining beam in a smaller community to gain the efficiency immediately. Yes, I think this time frame, and once we get the approval from council, we are expecting by next full council, and then we'll start the process of purchasing the truck, the remaining beams. So hopefully before end of the year, we'll be able to fully implement the system.
Thank you. So on that note, I'd be in favor of this, the time frame of it for sure. Mayor Muckles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm still of the mindset that we play the whole course on the modernization. My decision is based on what if the modernization doesn't pass next week. We're trying to make decisions for next year based on knowing what the decision is going to be next week. And I know there's a sense of urgency. There's a will of council to move with a modernization that excludes recycling because of reason A, B, and C. We've chose that collectively. And now we want to move ahead with the other part without confirming the decision. So to me, process-wise, I'm more comfortable having this as an action item or discussion item in the future after we know where we are. That would be my logic. So that's for that reason specifically, I can't support this. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be speaking in favor of the proposed motion. This is something that we've discussed all through the meeting, and I think it's pretty clear what my position is. And I don't think there's any harm in passing a motion today to have a discussion about getting some input. Sorry, not about having a discussion, about getting some public feedback regarding recycling, regardless of what the outcome of the vote is at regular next week. There's certainly no harm in going to the public and getting some information, regardless of how waste management moves in the future. Some feedback to inform the conversation is never a bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. All right, any other council? Sorry.
Yeah, my apologies, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to make it clear. I said it was one of the reasons. The other reason I just really I use this logic. It's just not a priority for me right now. Like we have to pick and choose. We still have an interim CEO. We don't have a permanent CEO in place. We have a long list of other issues, and recycling isn't on my agenda. And I want the public to know that that's not a priority or really short-term priority. Do we have to look at it at some point? Absolutely. But to me, it's I don't know what number it is on my list, but to use resources from the town and make this a focal point to get engagement, bring the public in. I have to rank things in my mind, and that's just truthfully not on my list. In July of 2020, and I wanted to communicate that was the other reason why I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. All right, if there's no other discussion, I'm going to call to question. That the committee direct administration to conduct public engagement, including an online session and in-person session on recycling options before the end of first quarter 2021. Call that question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that's carried 5-1. All right, Council, any other matters on this action item? I just have one question to administration, and Councillor Nielsen brought this up a little bit earlier, but the education portion of, I'm assuming doesn't need direction at all, that'll be obviously after next week. depending on the outcome of the meeting, but that doesn't need a direction, I'm guessing.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other matters, council? If not, then I'm going to move on to our fourth action item, and that is the last of our action items. It's the amendments to the remuneration policy number 052. I'm going to turn it over to CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The remuneration policy number 52 is before council this evening in order to achieve the changes that were requested to the current policy earlier this year, including additions, revisions, and clarifications that include that administration complete all council timesheets, that clarification regarding the definition of meetings be achieved, that consecutive meetings be deemed a single meeting in relation to meeting fees, that basic reporting be required for council-approved committee and board meetings, that the above reports be included in the council agenda package on a monthly basis, and that items that constitute conference participation be tracked and reported separately from regular remuneration. These amendments came at council's request and were supported through the amended versions attached. The recommended action for this item is to proceed with approval at a regular council meeting for version 2, which incorporates all requested changes. I have Ms. Way here who prepared the report and the changes to the policy, and she's available to assist in answering any questions that council might have. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council, any just questions or discussion? Councillor Nelson?
And before I started, I appreciate the work that was done on this, especially with the long list of changes. But I do have a couple questions. So one is on 3.2.3, and I think it's the same on both versions. I'm looking at 97 of 24. And it reads, submit a monthly report when appointed to committee, to administration detailing the meeting name, start and end time, as well as summary of discussions and decisions. It's my personal belief that our remuneration should be contingent on that. So if we submit a timesheet and it has the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority, but we don't submit the summary of it, we do not get remunerated. So with this, it's kind of treated as two separate things. I think it's important that it's contingent upon. One of the struggles that we have as a council and previous council and the one before that, council reporting is always at the end of meetings and it's very, very short, and it's not set up in a way that the rest of council could be asking questions, and it's not necessarily when the public can get good feedback. So I think it's critical that if you want to get paid for going to a committee meeting, you submit something in writing of what you did at that meeting and what was discussed. So I don't know how to achieve that, or if a direction is required or what, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think making a change like that would require the support of council, so a direction would be appreciated in order to amend what's here.
I may have a question to that too, and it's not that I disagree with that at all. I think I was also in favor of, being a little more involved in knowing what every councillor is doing at the committees, and I think, having some sort of report, to be able to ask questions about, I think are great. I guess the other though is the remuneration. Does that policy like the other remuneration in regards to the committee comes together, what we get paid? Would that contradict if we were to put that in here or something? Like right now, it just says we get paid to go to committee meetings, right? This one would be okay to change that? And I guess I'm talking about is that just to refer to the amounts that committee that's going to be put together? Maybe I'm not being clear.
It's the committee that recommends this policy.
Right, that recommends the policy. So this is the policy, but there's another one, that appointed committee is going to come together. And right now, can we do that in this policy and make that without that committee making a determination of it? Maybe I'm still not being clear. I'm confusing myself right now, so.
I think Ms. Fox may be able to provide some clarification.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I couldn't see Ms. Way's head, so I didn't want to put my hand up, but I couldn't see that she was answering the question. So thank you, Chair. through to council, I just want to get some clarification. So the committee itself that supports the remuneration policy is really there to determine what amount of remuneration that council would get. So changing this in the policy, I don't believe, and I'm just thinking off the fly, I don't believe would affect that.
Okay.
So I think you're fine, unless Ms. Way has other information.
Sorry. Okay, Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, and building off of that, that committee only makes recommendations. Council could do whatever we wanted with it. There's obviously political challenges if the committee recommends we pay each other or pay ourselves X and we say, well, let's do it X times 3. Well,
Yeah.
you got it. But I think especially in something that adds clarity and consistency, I think that's something that's more in the realm of council because we understand the processes of committees. So yeah, we're certainly not contravening anything by making adjustments to this policy.
Thank you. Councilor Racy to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So who makes the determination that, my summary of my meeting that I attended is worthy of our fee? I don't know who to look at.
Well, I think that's a political thing. It's no different than the summaries that we're giving verbally right now. And some summaries are probably going to be, like, I would suggest that Councillor Magoon's golf summary will probably be more extensive than others because he's just more extensive with them. So it's really a flavor, but having the start time, the end time, and what the decisions were, and I think it'll evolve as to what each councillor feels is appropriate for the level of communication. So I don't think it's a matter of you need 500 words in order to consider a summary. It'll really depend on the content. So
May I continue? So it's not like Wendy would take a look at it and say, you know what, this is not worthy. So, okay. I know, it's just you want to be clear on how we're gonna do this.
And if I may, I think it's just a little bit of accountability and responsibility, and it's on the ownership and professionalism as a counselor. But I think I personally think it's a good idea. I think it gives us more investment in that, and it gives the other counselors an opportunity to ask questions of the other committees, because it is council committees. It's not just your committee; it's all of ours. So I think it's a reasonable thing. And I think a lot of times it's going to be a quick summary of the things, but you take the time to do it. So, all right. I have myself and then yourself. So the one thing that stood out for me in it that I wanted to bring up, and that's the reviewer of timesheets. Currently, it states that the CAO reviews with the mayor, and I think that it puts somewhat, or does put our CAO and any administration at a bit of a awkward position to be in. And I think personally, I would like to see either the mayor themselves be they'll basically look at the timesheets and sign off on them on councilors, and in such the deputy mayor on the mayor in those cases. But I just feel that putting an employee in that position can make it awkward for them. So I don't know if that's, I can look at CO Olson and Ms. Way about what is best practices, but I think we've run into that a couple of times that it makes it awkward. So any thoughts on that? Ms. Way?
Thank you, Chair. Through to the remainder of council. I did investigate that. We did discuss that at length as to who should be approving. It seemed as though through the direction that was given, that the intent was largely to remove the administrative burden from council. So we did kind of toss that around. Through the other comparators that I did look at, largely silent on this as to how it gets processed and who's approving. The procedures in comparable municipalities were nowhere near as robust as what we've been doing and both brought forward additionally. So that would be an easy enough change wherein the mayor would approve, the attendance of those meetings by his counselors. Easy enough to change. Did not show up in the comparables, but I can see the strain that may put having the CAO make those approvals. And again, it was not part of the original direction. So with all of the changes in there, that wasn't one that I felt comfortable taking the liberty to take. But with direction, we can make that change for sure. Thank you.
No, and I appreciate that. But I'm curious on what Chris, the council thinks. So Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, what do other mayors and other municipalities sign off on this? And the reason is, I would need administrative help. I'm not going to be able to follow up, and I'm not going to do administrative work on, was Councillor Nelson present? Not to pick on Councillor Nelson, he's very punctual and always at his meetings. But you know what I mean? Like this is administrative work where I don't know if an elected official should be confirming whether or not, unless there's parameters or verbiage that it's almost just signing off in order for the councillor to get paid, but is not accountable for double checking all of their work, because that is, yeah. So
if I may, and I realize Councillor Nelson, you were in the queue, but I just wanted to wrap this one up. So I guess my question, and I agree with that, my question to administration currently, is that a part of the process to sign off on that we double check, or is it more so on, how does that work?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Fox.
Okay.
I believe she can provide some clarification.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Chair through to Council. The current process right now has Ms. Anderson goes through all of the information, which I don't believe would change, goes through the information and collects all the data and signs off that she's reviewed, and from what she understands, what council attends, everything aligns and makes sense. Then that goes to a further step of having the CAO or myself. In the current policy, it's the Director of Corporate Services that's supposed to manage that policy, go through and have another look and check and sign off. Financially, as an audit procedure, to have a different person preparing it and another person reviewing and signing off would be necessary. So I don't think that would be changing. So what would happen is still the information could come forward from Ms. Anderson to the mayor, or it could go to the CAO to the mayor for that other step there. And then the mayor could take a look at it. I think where the issue comes in is holding accountability of council. It is hard for administration, if they see error, if they see issue, to try and hold council accountable for that. So they can point out that maybe the policy isn't being followed or there's mistakes being made, but at the end of the day, if council pushes back and administration feels intimidated in any way, they can't hold accountability. So for that audit check, I do support the mayor being that final checkoff. I do financially, from that perspective, see that there's a benefit. I do understand that for the mayor to go through and try and pull all this stuff together, but to have a quick look over and see if it seems legitimate, and if there is any difficulties within the policy, obviously that conflict resolution piece is important. But I'll leave it at that, hand it back over.
And if I may, that was my intent. I didn't intend for the mayor to go through all of the things. I assume it would be if there's any discrepancies that will come forward from either Wendy or then that would be brought to the mayor. The mayor then would contact that particular councillor on this matter and have that discussion, right? So that's my intent. I never at all wanted you to go through all of that, but that final check, I believe in any discrepancies, and it currently right now puts the CEO in that position, if that's what I understand.
If I can, Mr. Chair, the way that the policy is being rewritten, it actually encourages liaising with the mayor, deputy mayor to resolve any discrepancies.
Okay.
So I'm comfortable myself with the way that it's written here,
Okay.
For the CAO to review and approve that, to work with Ms. Anderson or the executive assistant to support that. If things are missing or incomplete, or there's discrepancies or concerns, then it comes to the mayor, and that is the process as it stands right now as well. So I'm comfortable with the way it's written.
And I might have missed that. My apologies if I did, because before we used to get some interaction with, like, that made it difficult. So that's, as long as that's in there and the CEO, current CEO feels comfortable with that, I'm fine with that as well. So, okay. All right, I'll go off that matter then. Thank you. Count back to Councillor Nelson.
I'll make a direction to clean that first thing
Okay.
up. Direct administration to amend council remuneration policy number 052 to include a requirement for committee summaries by the 8th day of each month in order to receive remuneration. Perfect. And basically that just means when you submit your timesheets, the expectation is that you also have submitted your all of your committee appointments. So the last thing that you're doing is likely going to be your remuneration for the previous month and throughout that month. You have the entire month after each committee meeting, but when you submit your remuneration, your committees also have to be submitted by that time as well. Thank you.
Can I make a comment? Just the timelines with weekends and wanting the pay to be done no later than the 15th, that's not leaving a lot of time. Somebody has to compile all that information. So the deadline, I'm just saying the 8th might be a bit late for submission.
If I could, I think if it wouldn't necessarily be report like in the info packages or whatever else. Like I think it could fall in whatever month. I don't know. I almost look to administration to figure out the mechanism, but I think as long as council has submitted everything that's on their timesheet prior to, along with the timesheet, wherever it has to go in as far as when the information is reported, I think it just is what it is. I don't know.
Well, maybe provide a bit of a comment. I did see that Ms. Way had her hand up as well. I'm not sure if that's still something that she wants to speak on, but I believe Ms. Anderson, maybe what you're suggesting is that instead of saying the 8th day of the month, it's the Wednesday or the 5th or the Wednesday prior to the 15th, or something that can be universally applied no matter where the 8th falls on. I suppose the other way to interpret that is that no later than the 8th, it would be taken upon the councillors to ensure that that they're getting that in time for if there's a weekend that it falls on. I mean, that is making some assumptions that wouldn't be spelled out in this policy, but that's kind of my take on that. The other piece, I guess, for clarification is that then timesheets are submitted with the committee updates. The committee updates are then put in the next following information package to council. So if that, again, if the 8th is whatever day of the week, it might be a week after that council reviews those, and as long as that's understood by council.
And I think this is something that could evolve in the future too. I think it would be best for all of council to submit it as close to when the meeting, you have a committee meeting, you make your notes in the meeting, you send that email or you send that report out while it's still fresh. And so I think my expectation for myself would be to send it right after the committee meeting. But I think making the requirement be, as long as it's in by the time you want to get paid for it, you can get paid for it. And maybe in the future, we look at amending this policy to say that your reporting has to fall within 1 week of the completion of that meeting or something. But I think you submit them as you go, as efficiently as possible, so that council is updated as quickly as possible. I think that's a future expectation that can be tightened if this works. But I don't want to put a really restrictive timeline on council to do something that's new. Right?
Any other thoughts, questions? Council? Councillor Stashik.
Was that a motion request for consensus? If so, I'd like to see it.
Yep.
And I'll probably speak to it.
If you bring that up.
It's on the.
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, okay.
You're
Got it.
zoomed, it's.
Mike was
Okay,
there you go.
View. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Yep, no worries. Councillor Stashik?
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to speak to it. There's no way that I'm going to support this. I'm sorry, but I have quite a few questions. I'm okay with pretty much everything on these amendments except for the reporting requirement. So there's several not council committees. There's several committees that councillors have seats on that aren't council committees. Those committees might not appreciate having their information shared. They might not appreciate having their information shared when they're having discussions that aren't really relevant to the business before the town. There's discussions that happen a lot of times that are simply discussions until there's some point where a decision's made to move in a particular direction. Until then, having those discussions publicized is probably not in the best interest of the community. So I've got concerns about the whole reporting thing in itself. Also, as duly elected officials, I find it a little bit offensive that we're being asked to justify in writing that we spent our time effectively in committees that we're appointed to. So I've got concerns around the whole thing, and having remuneration hinge on filing a written report about something that happened at a meeting, I won't support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council? Any other thoughts on this? Councillor Waugh?
Yeah, I don't find this aspect of it, all that egregious. I think there are components of this, of the work that administration did that I didn't necessarily see as necessary, but I do appreciate that they did it. And now that they have done it, I will support it. In particular, I did like the fact that we got some clarity about meetings that run back to back and how those are going to be charged out, because I know that had caused some confusion in the past. So yeah, I do appreciate the work that was done. I don't have nearly as many issues or the same issues that Councillor Stashik has. I don't think it was particularly necessary, but you know what? I'm willing to roll with it and comply with anything that council passes. So thank you.
So if I may,
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
So thank you, Councillor. Well, we're discussing the direction. There's a current the overall, we've come out, there's a direction now that we have specifically to the reporting linked to the payment. So if you could speak to that, if you have comments on that, but we got to get that one out of the way first.
Then my apologies for rambling on that. I'll be speaking in support of this. I don't mind it all that much. I don't know if it's particularly necessary, but I'm willing to roll with it. Thank you.
All right, council, any other? All right, I will then call the question. There's a direct administration, to amend council remuneration policy number 052 to include a requirement for committee summaries by the 8th day of each month in order to receive remuneration. Councillor Reyes?
So remuneration for that particular meeting, not.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Sure, but it doesn't say that.
See it again, please. See remuneration.
Yeah, if we want to add for said committee, that's.
Sometimes it's good to be crystal clear.
Yeah, because of the way it is, thank you for that, for Councilor Reyes, because it looks like if you don't put it in by that date, you get nothing. So, yeah, so,
Coming up.
no, I appreciate that clarification, yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Mayor
Chair. Just for clarity, I'm trying to play this out in my head. I don't mind it. And I think it's a little bit better than verbal, because sometimes verbal, you're busy and stuff, and you just kind of wing it. But if it's not in by the 8th, but you do it the next day later, can you claim it the month later? Like stuff like that, like, you know, people are on vacation, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but there's little things like that.
Yeah, and if we're going back to it, I know we called the question, but we changed it there. I like the fact of reporting. I don't particularly like the fact that it's linked to the pay of it. I think it does put some accountability that there's a report put in, and it may also, you know, we can state though the Councilor Stashik said, I attended this meeting, however, based on, you know, is there, it's discussed in confidence, can't, you know, whether it's FOIP or whatever, right? So I don't know, but there may be a way just to acknowledge I was at this meeting and, yeah, sorry, we called it the question. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I like the concept of this, and now thinking of just that situation, I'd like to support that something that you have to give in a written report before you claim it. And that doesn't tie in the days, but if you claim it on an expense sheet, you have to have had to send it a written before you do it. So if you do it the month later, I don't know. I know CEO Olson had her hand up. If you do it the next day, the 9th or the 10th, you can claim it the next month, then I'm good with this, if that includes that. Because that might happen to somebody, and I'd be okay, and I can support that, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is around how complicated this is getting and how the onus is on administration now so that will increase the number of discrepancies and increase potentially the number of issues that come forward through receiving those reports. The other piece I wanted to mention is that it doesn't actually spell out in this policy, maybe this is something that is just caught at this point, what we do with those summaries. It says that councils must submit a monthly report detailing the meeting name, start and end time, as well as a summary of the discussions and decisions. So they're providing that to administration, but as per this policy, we're not actually doing anything with that. I looked to Ms. Way, I think she had her hand up, maybe able to provide clarification.
Ms. Way?
Just to answer CAO Olson's remark there, I believe is in here. I'm just scrolling through to find that section. It had been intended that administration include those reports as the direction. I think I'll find the track changes and I'll follow up with you guys.
All right, so I think we've all expressed our thoughts on this particular direction. So I'm going to try this again and call it to question that direct administration to amend council remuneration policy number 052 to include a requirement for committee summaries by the 8th day of each month in order to receive remuneration for said committee meeting. All those in favor? It's 3 and opposed. That's defeated. Okay. Anyone else regards to Councilor Watt or sorry, Councilor Nelson?
I guess then my question goes back to, it's our responsibility to submit it. Is there a timeline in which we're having to submit it then? Because no offense, if we're submitting something 6 months later from a committee that happened, it's probably not information that is usable, or do we just leave it as it is right now, and the onus is on us to do it in a manner that's politically timely, right? Like, we're ultimately, especially with remuneration, we're politically tied to all of these things. So if we're going to bill for a committee meeting and we take 6 months to submit a report, then we have to eat that politically. So if council's fine with it staying the way it is, I'm okay with that too.
So if I may, and it's a reasonable question. I mean, typically, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we start off with a standing committee on the first Tuesday and following into a regular, correct?
Regulars first.
Regulars first. Okay, so I'm just looking at July here, so regular is first. So by the second regular meeting, that we have that report in by that second regular meeting, which gives the opportunity that if we have it in by that, then if council in the reporting has any questions in regards to the reports that were submitted, I'm just throwing it out there as a reasonable time frame. Any thoughts on that? Because it's a reasonable question. If we don't have a deadline, you may not, even submit it, obviously. But if we have, some accountability there, whether it's, it's not necessarily remuneration, but it's an expectation. Mayor Michaels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can support a timeline like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, thoughts on that? Which I would be, I can't make that direction, so somebody else would have to make that direction. CEO Olsen, I think, did you have something to say? Sorry. And then Councillor Nelson.
This, apologies, this isn't quite related to what the discussion taking place now. It was, I just want to identify that it was my error. I was looking at the wrong version of the report. It's actually spelled out in there that it will be included in the information report. I was looking at version 1 instead of version 2.
Okay.
So thanks to Ms. Wade for pointing that out to me and helping me to find my place.
Okay. Councillor Nelson.
I think if we're not going to tie it to a date where it is with something else that's works for council, the challenge with saying before the second regular meeting, well, half of our months we don't have second regulars. Like, I don't know, like either we tie it to something or we just see how it goes with a new reporting, and same as we do verbally, it's kind of on us to do the reporting verbally. And I just think tying it to regular council meetings, we switch them, we change dates, then we've got, some that fall after the second regular, but within that same month, and they're part of monthly. Like, again, it just seems like it's getting complicated.
Fair enough. Or do we remove it altogether if it's not going to serve the purpose of it potentially, and just possibly not go with what we've been doing and have our committee reports the way they are with no necessarily written submission? Just a thought. Okay, any other matters on this then, Councillor Nelson?
In the parts about workshops, there's a new part in there that says mandatory workshops as declared by the mayor. And it also says that workshops are not included. So a workshop wouldn't be included unless it's mandatory from the mayor, but can the mayor make a workshop mandatory? Like, is that in the weak mayor system? Can he force us to go somewhere?
Sorry, where are you at? Just so
I'm currently on 103 of 124.
Okay.
I think it's on both versions as well.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the same concern as Councillor Nelson, and I think conceptually, I was trying to wrap my mind around, as long as it's a workshop that is driven by administration for all of council, then it's fine. Any other workshop outside of it being supported and driven by administration, then, sorry, I don't want to exclude if council decides to have a workshop, but anything personally, a workshop that you do on your personal choice, you can't claim. That's part of your remuneration. That's conceptually what I'd like to support. And here, yeah, I could just make up a lot of workshops and, yeah, which is not my intent, but. So,
So what, if I may, so currently what you're saying is, because currently the way it's set up is that we do attend a workshop, we get remuneration for it. What you're saying is that those workshops are on our own in the monthly, or?
No.
Oh,
so as long as the workshop, and maybe it has to be defined, a workshop that is put on by administration or directed by council
right.
is, you can compensate. Any other workshops outside of that, so you can join the workshops for, Bill and Barbara put together, and you choose to go on your own as a counselor,
right.
a workshop like that you couldn't charge.
Okay.
But it opens up another,
So,
Yeah, for clarification, if it's a workshop deemed appropriate for council, but not meant for all of council, that's part of our conference budget.
Right.
Right, we have a separate budget for elective things that we choose to go and
Right.
attend. But things like a budget workshop, which is, maybe I don't know how to word it, those things make sense to be covered by our monthly stuff.
got it. So if I can clarify, it's then on your plate, whether it comes from, like if I go to if I'm attending right now an EOP workshop, it's coming out of my professional development fund, right? Which is still getting the remuneration for it. So, but it's not coming out of another budget of council. So thank you, CEOs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So under the definitions, workshop is defined, and I'm wondering if it's just that word mandatory that needs to be taken out. I think it's defined as council members, administration, and others deemed necessary engaged in discussion. So if that captures it, but removing mandatory, so mandatory is deemed by the mayor, if that piece summarizes what the issue is.
Yeah, I guess if I may, before we go to that, but Ms. Way, if she could, because what is the intent of the mandatory?
So as you know, a number of admin had worked on this, so it changed hands a number of times, and this was one of the ones that a note was left kind of in the margins as something that needed to be further identified. So I did look into what other municipalities had and how they were determining exactly what we're trying to figure out right now is, well, who can go to what and when, and that is how one community had slated their workshops, is that the mayor was the only one that could decide whether it would be paid or not. So that was just in line with what other communities are doing, but I do prefer the language that Mr. Mayor has provided us regarding, driven by admin or directed by council. That would clean this up significantly and wouldn't require alterations to Schedule A as well.
Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, I think in the stuff above where it talks about workshops, that maybe that changes to elective or optional or self-directed workshops maybe. That way maybe self-directed would be under the honorariums piece. If it's self-directed workshops, that means something we've chosen on our own to do is not part of our honorarium, or is part of our honorarium, not part of. But then it takes it on the other one. Just ignore me completely.
It is getting late. It's stretching on. So, okay. All right. So, anybody else on this? Do we need a direction to change it, or does administration? Do we need the direction, I guess, to change that? I'm looking to a CEO. Yeah.
I think we would prefer in order to capture exactly what's been discussed.
Councilor Nelson.
Would it be appropriate just to direct administration to clarify workshops? Does that give you enough to take what we've kind of talked about and clean it up? And perfect. I'd like to direct administration to clarify workshops in policy number 052. I'm not speaking to it.
Gotcha. All right. I think that's self-explanatory. Anybody does want to speak to it? And we'll call it to question. The committee direct administration to clarify workshops and policy number 052. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, any other matters in regards to this action item? Councillor Watt, do you want to share what you said before? Because I agree with you. I totally agree. Definitely clearing up the meetings of 2 meetings, 1 meeting, what it is was great. I think that was one of the biggest, questions that probably Wendy got or her administration got a lot of the time. So I appreciate that. So I think that's one big thing. So. All right, so I'm looking for, Councillor,
Me.
Ms. Fox.
I've been doing the same thing. Thank you, Chair, through to Council. Just again, a shout out to Heather or Miss Way. She took this on, and honestly, it's something that probably I should have had more time invested into, and it fell in a long list of items we tried to move forward. And she's done a great job picking this up, taking in the direction and the feedback, and really making this something that supports council and also helps administration. So I just, again, want to show my appreciation for the work that she's done with this to help you guys and to help us. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. All right, so council, thank you, Ms. Fox. Council, anybody interested in, we have some options of direction for administration on this matter? I can make it myself, but I can't. No, it's getting long. It's getting late. Councillor Nelson.
I'll direct that committee refer policy number 052 back to a standing meeting of council for further discussion and review. It's number 5, but wondering if we can narrow it down to, I think council was fond of version 2, and I'd rather come back to standing just discussing one version. So for further discussion and review of version 2.
And yeah. And sorry, you speak to it?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. It would be version 2 as amended,
amended
from the previous motion. That includes that clarification on motion.
Thanks.
So if I could speak to it, I see this, but I'm not sure with the small changes that we've done. I would be comfortable with it coming to a regular meeting rather than coming back to a standing committee meeting, and that's just my preference. I don't think it's an urgent, matter that needs to be done ASAP, but I just thought if it's something, brought back with the changes, the few changes we've mentioned, and have the further discussion in regular. I just don't know if it's needed to another standing meeting. So, but those are my thoughts. Mayor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question to administration is, could this be turned around for July 21st? And if so, then I would support it going to standing. Then we can have a look at it July 21st, and then officially pass it in August anyway. That gives it an opportunity. So.
Yeah, if it comes around. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think narrowing it down to one, it was a bit, with all the track changes part, I think it made it a little bit confusing which one we were going to. The other part is we have so few meetings in the summer for both regular standing and committees that really this will have better impact and better testing for September anyway. So to me, it coming back in August into regular is A-okay. Thank you.
And then that being said, I don't think it's going to be a long conversation based on tonight, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, July 21st is no problem to bring it back to council at the standing committee meeting.
Okay. All right, any other discussion before I call this direction to question? All right, so we have a direction that committee refer policy number 052 back to a standing meeting of council for further discussion and review of version 2 as amended. All those in favor? And none opposed, so that's carried unanimously. All right. Thank you, council. We have now wrapped up our action items for the evening. So we're just going to move around if the urgent matters from council. So I'll start with the screen. Councillor Waugh. Any urgents from council?
Just one question, if I could. I was chatting with a resident today, and they wanted to know what the process is now if they wanted to do a minute with council.
Good question. Thank you. CEOs.
Thank you, Chair. This is something that administration has been discussing as well with the mayor to determine a process to reintroduce that while maintaining the health and safety of the people in the room and the people that would be coming to speak to council. So we're looking at implementing something next week. There's a little bit of planning that has to go into that. I'll be able to confirm by the end of the week to allow people some time to plan if they are coming. What we're looking at really is a kind of a registration so that people give us a heads up if they're coming. They would have to be met by somebody at the door, sign in, and then queue in the hallway and come in one at a time. The other option that we're considering as well, and again, we'll confirm by the end of the week, is written submissions for Minute with Council. At this point, I don't know if that that would encourage the public to write, and we would be overwhelmed with submissions rather than having them come in. It's something that we're considering though in the meantime, knowing that these are different circumstances than usual, and the community does engage in Minute with Council regularly, and providing them an opportunity to bring that forward again is something that we're working through this week. But appreciate the question.
Appreciate that, Ms. Olson. Thank you.
Just one for myself and the council Nelson. One quick thing is potential if there's too many here, possibly a laptop in the maybe in the foyer too, set up to Zoom potentially, so they can be included in that. To try to keep the physical distancing. Less access to if there's too many people in there or something. Just a thought. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and we're looking at the planning for this, and as well if we have a number of community members that have registered by noon that day to let us know that they're coming. It doesn't necessarily they don't need to share what they're going to be coming to talk about, but just to let us know that they will be coming to the building. Then administration can make some of those adjustments and have fewer of us in the room so that we're able to have them come in.
Okay, Councillor Nelson, you had.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand why a citizen couldn't just join via Zoom. The host can admit and kick people as need be. So if somebody is given the Zoom link and joins for their minute and then gets the boot and gets to listen or watch the rest on YouTube, to me it seems like a pretty simple opportunity rather than creating the risk and strangeness of them coming into the building. So I encourage exploring that. It seems like the most simple of all of the solutions, but I don't really have a specific question.
And I completely appreciate that. Just looking at removing as many barriers as possible for people to come and engage with council. Not everyone has Zoom or is comfortable using it, but still would like a moment with council to share their views. So looking into the future and obtaining some sort of normalcy with our meetings, it might be, but again, it is something to consider. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Nice. Okay, thank you, Councillor Watt. Councillor Stashik, any urgent matters?
I have nothing, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stashik. All right, so Councillor Nelson.
I had one, strangely Minute with Council is one of the things that I questioned, but mine is around budget and things that were changed or paused during, or stopped or canceled during the state of local emergency. And basically at a really high level, if we canceled something during the state of local emergency, i.e. laid off staff, and we saved $100,000, where does that $100,000 go? And then how would it get moved from there? And if I can just kind of quickly have an example, if we save $100,000 in corporate services for staffing, does that go into reserves and then require council approval to come back out? Or like, and how the sole and not sole ties into that?
Tia Wilson?
So I'll provide an answer, and I'll look to Ms. Fox to assist if I've missed anything. So the money that was saved through, excluding the SOL, but looking at the pandemic response and operationally the decisions that we made to offset losses and increased expenditures was based around the direction that council provided us to employ cost mitigating strategies in order to manage the budget as best as possible. So that the money that was saved wouldn't go into a reserve. The direction was to manage the operational budget through those strategies to offset any of those losses. So decisions made, and we've come very close to netting that out, are remaining in the operational budget, aren't moved to a reserve unless directed to by council, which I'm not sure is an option in any case, but I would look to Ms. Fox if there's anything that I've missed there.
Thank you, Ms. Olson, or Chair, if it's okay if I talk through to Council and Councillor Nelson. Yeah, Ms. Olson covered it. The only thing I would add there is in regards to the SOL is that at this point in time, we are not aware of recovering any money. So if we were at some point to recover money through the SOL to cover some of those losses off, and we didn't have to utilize our cost savings, you guys may have a surplus. In the case of a surplus, you could make a few decisions at year-end time. One would be to offset previous year's losses. So as you're aware, previous year's losses are reflected in our reserve balances as unrestricted deficiency, and right now they're negative. And what happens is in a year that you have a loss, which isn't typical, but when it does happen, it's actually cash loss. So you have to take money out of your reserves, and that's reflected as this unrestricted deficiency. So if you left a surplus in there, it would be a surplus that then tries to fix that negative balance. The other decision council would have at that time is to place any surplus through that process into a reserve of their choice. So there is a couple options for council if that comes into play.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be tricky to understand it when we all see our financials, because it's going to be a lot of creativity to get to stay on budget, right? So, and I appreciate that, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Race?
I'm good, thank you, sir.
Okay, Mayor Michaels?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
And I have nothing myself either. So, Chief Administrative Officer, status report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything to share today. Just happy to be back after a week and a half vacation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Happy to have you back. Legislative service update, anything there?
I guess there is a small update, and maybe Ms. Way, if there's anything that I missed here. We have entered into a contract with Ms. Rhonda West to provide legislative services, utilizing the wage, I guess, the budget for legislative services clerk in the meantime, as we look to recruit permanently. She's familiar with the organization. There's a couple pieces of project work that we really need to advance, and as well to look to her to answer some of our legislative questions that come about. It's a small contract, but we're happy to have her assistance as we look to fill that position permanently. So that's the update there.
Thank you. All right, and executive assistance logistics information. Nothing for you. All right. Okay, council, that brings us to the end of our additional information. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, if anyone. Councillor Race.
Move to adjourn.
All right, and all those in favor?